Class is in session, hitting the books. Pub Sports Radio, Monday, October the 2nd. Ian Cameron and Conor Mack with you as we are each and every Monday to break down the college football card. Your early week look at the college football card. Weeknight games, many of the marquee games on Saturday. We hit them all right here on Hitting the Books. Shout out to everyone in the chat joining us. Very kind words from Jeffrey Moore. I appreciate that. Very, very kind to say that. Great stuff. We've got another good slate coming up this week in college football. We got a lot of games, and the one thing is we want to get right into it so we don't go too long on the show. So let's get into it. We got Wednesday night Sun Belt football. How awesome is that? How cool is that? We've got Jacksonville State taking on Middle Tennessee State. I should say CUSA. Wednesday night CUSA football. Jacksonville State taking on Middle Tennessee State in Conference USA action. Middle Tennessee, 4-point home favorites, 51.5 being the total in this game. So it's pretty much stayed around that number since it opened up. Jacksonville State, I'm telling you what, Conor Mack, that's one of the luckiest wins I had certainly last week in college football. Jacksonville State, somehow, some way, Sam Houston State finally discovers an offense, or that they have one last week. It's Jacksonville State. They couldn't move the ball a lick. A team that had, 13 points or something in their first 3 games combined. And then all of a sudden they're going up and down the field for a large portion of that game against Jacksonville State's defense. But Jacksonville State made some good defensive adjustments. They held Sam Houston to just 7 in the second half. Credit to them. And they roared back from a big deficit to not only win the game 35-28 in overtime, but cover the initial point spread as well, laying anywhere from 6 to 6.5 in that game. Although you might have gotten a push like our guy Jimmy the Bag did, because he got +7 on Sam Houston State, which thank goodness he had +7 on that. That would have been horrendous for anyone that had just 6 or 6.5 on Sam Houston State side. But Jacksonville State survives with the victory. Now they'll go on the road for a second straight week for a midweek weeknight college football game here against a Middle Tennessee State team that has certainly looked porous here their last 2 games against Colorado State and Western Kentucky, especially on defense. Given up 31 points in both of those games. Haven't been impressed with the quarterback either. Up and down, he's been Vadiato, the quarterback for Middle Tennessee State. You know, I'll tell you what about Jacksonville State. They don't have a polished pocket passer on their team, whether it's Logan Smothers, who got the start last week, or Zion Webb. Rich Rod's been going back and forth between both quarterbacks. They're not great, passing quarterbacks, but this is a team that can absolutely run the football, and both quarterbacks can move with their legs a little bit. So the key matchup here is, can this Middle Tennessee State team stop the run? And if they can't stop the run, they're going to be in trouble. Well, the run defense numbers aren't great. 4.1 yards per rush allowed, 140 rushing yards per game allowed. It's not exactly what you want to see against a team that's averaging nearly 5 yards per carry and averaging 224 yards per game on the ground this season, which Jacksonville State is. I kind of like the dog here, Jacksonville State. I'm certainly not ready in their current form to lay points with Middle Tennessee State. Conor Mack, what do you think here to start the week?
Yeah, that's there's just teams that you don't want to lay points with, and like Middle Tennessee, even being here at home, middle of the week, they should be pumped up for this. I couldn't lay 3 points, not with this defense. I just wanted to hit on this total. I'd lean a little bit to the under. Middle Tennessee's defense has been okay, but they've had trouble scoring, and unders have cashed for them in this one. So I'm looking at the under, and I have to lean the points with Jacksonville State. I think they'll be able to run it, and I think they'll be able to keep this game close. This would be a good win for them, outright. But I think the 3 here is a close one.
Yeah. And the other game on Wednesday night, man, I love seeing it. I really do. I love seeing these Wednesday night. And this is a new staple. We didn't have this last year in college football. First season, we see this where we've got these Wednesday night in October. Usually it's a MAC night. We think of Wednesday, Tuesday night college football as MAC conference action. But no, this year they've got this new Conference USA contract. So we get these Conference USA games now on a Wednesday night. And we have another one here on Wednesday night from CUSA. Florida International and New Mexico State. New Mexico State, 6.5 point home favorites, 50.5, 51 is the total here in this game. New Mexico State, 2-3. Florida International, believe it or not, 3-2. Now, if you look at Florida International's 3-2 record, could quibble a little bit about the schedule, but you can only play who you've been up against. And this team's not only 3-2 straight up, but 3-2 against the spread. More importantly, 3-1 against the spread as an underdog this season. The only time they did not cover in the dog role was their last game against Liberty. So that is something to keep in mind going into this game against New Mexico State, especially with them catching points. It was an ugly game, though, 38-6 for Florida International, their last game against Liberty. They did not play out last week, so it's like a mini bye week for both of these teams entering this game. Caden Salter and the run game for Liberty really got going against Florida International. It is worth noting, Keon Jenkins here, Kewan Jenkins, I should say, for Florida International, took over at quarterback for Grayson James in that last game against Liberty. And to be quite honest with you, I don't blame Mike McIntyre for making the first of all, he's a head coach I respect, I like. I think he's doing his amazing job really with a program that was just in shambles when he took it over. And for them to already be somewhat competitive here this year, you give him credit. I don't question his decision making like I do some moron coaches. And when he says that Grayson James not playing well, I'm going to go to Kewan Jenkins instead. I think it's not a bad move. We'll see how he does here. We'll see where he goes with the quarterback spot, because I don't think it's been confirmed that he's making the switch this week too. It might have been just a benching for that game. But if you had to ask me what my gut tells me I think Kewan Jenkins is probably going to start here against Florida International. And, he's still got to improve. He's got to still do better than what we saw against Liberty. Liberty's a pretty good team, though. 9 for 21, 133 yards. You got to be more efficient than that. But, man, Grayson James just was not doing anything in the passing game. So, to me, he almost had by default to make this change and see at least what Jenkins could give you at quarterback. On the New Mexico State side, entering this game, they are coming off a hard-fought loss on the island against Hawaii, 20-17 a couple weeks ago. They've alternated wins and losses to start the year. They had that very disappointing home opener against UMass, losing 41-30. They crushed Western Illinois, an FCS team after that. They lose by 16 at Liberty. So these two teams have a common opponent, both of them losing straight up in ATS to Liberty. New Mexico, they get a 27-17 road win, pretty impressive. And then 20-17, they lose against Hawaii. Again, this has that feel to just have that bad memories, Connor, of that first game where here's New Mexico State, home favorite, 6.5. I think they are the better team, and I still think they are the better team here, but they didn't play well. They couldn't stop UMass. They lost outright as a 6.5 point favorite. Florida International has been good in the underdog role. This is another one, just like the last game. I'm leaning underdog here with the Florida International Golden Panthers, and a team that you can even go back to last year with this squad, has been pretty good in the underdog role. Even last year, Middle Tennessee, the last game of the season, 19.5 point dog. They lose by 5. They were starting to cover some numbers down the stretch last year. I think it's a competitive game. As much as I like what New Mexico State can do offensively, we have seen them at times struggle defensively. This maybe is an offense they can contain, because it's not like Florida International's lit it up necessarily, but it's just, for me, difficult, even with this improvement under Jerry Kill, since he's been there since the beginning of last year. And I like Diego Pavia at quarterback, but it's still, for me, difficult to lay almost a touchdown with this team. And that first game against UMass is proof of that. What do you think here, C-Mac? Wednesday night, FIU, New Mexico State.
Yeah, New Mexico State here, back at home. This should be a decent spot, after the game in Hawaii and the week off. Both these teams kind of got beat up by Liberty. That's a common opponent. They both got took into the woodshed there. New Mexico State, I just think it's too many points. This was one I was hoping was just over the touchdown with FIU, because one thing they've struggled with on their side is their offense. They just haven't been able to score. I think they're around 105th in all D1 when I was going through it this morning. It's just been very tough for them to score. This is another one. These offenses aren't great. And New Mexico State got gashed against UMass. I was kind of like, wow, what the hell was that? The defense seemed to be better the last few weeks. I lean under in this game as well. I think this total's too high.
Yeah, leaning under here. And by the way, this opened 5.5, 6, and I'm even seeing 6.5. Bookmaker, DraftKings, couple books have moved to 6.5 here. I think if you like FIU, you wait, because you might be able to get this up to 7. And you know what I think people are seeing, and why the the Aggies have taken some money here is because you look at one matchup that would have to concern you, a run-heavy New Mexico State offense, by far run-heavy. They throw it, a lot more effectively than they do throwing. That they run the ball a lot more effectively than they do throw the ball. And they're averaging 202 rushing yards per game, 6.2 yards per carry. Well, guess what? FIU's run defense has been not too good. 5.2 yards per carry allowed, 214 rushing yards per game allowed. So I worry about that matchup a little bit. Even though I'm leaning FIU, I worry about that run defense, and New Mexico State primarily a running-based offense. So might be able to take advantage of that. All right, next up, Thursday night, we've got Sam Houston State and Liberty. I haven't done one of these in a while, so I'll do it. Liberty. There we go. 19 and a half point home favorites here for Liberty. 47 and a half the total in this one. So Sam Houston State, my condolences to anyone that had the Bearcats last week. Bearcats with a K, by the way, when it comes to Sam Houston State. That's brutal. Okay, and I had no business winning with Jacksonville State last week. None. Zero. So, and I'm okay admitting it. I had a wrong side, and I cashed a ticket. That's the way I look at it. If you had Sam Houston State, you deserved the money last week in that game. It's a horrible beat. You're up. You're basically leading the whole game, and then you end up losing in overtime. Not only losing the game straight up in overtime, you lose the money ATS as well. If you had 6.5 only on Sam Houston State. That's just
there's a couple like that. Duke hurt. That looked like a money line winner maybe, and the cover, and then you don't get the cover just like that.
Yeah, that's how it can happen. It just reminds me of the witching hour. What they always, Scott Hansen always says it on the NFL Red Zone channel. It's like when wins turn to losses and losses turn to wins. Yeah, no shit. Yeah, the final moments of a football game. Doesn't matter if it's NFL or college football. Witching hour in many college football venues last week with the betting results at the end. And Sam Houston and Jacksonville State was definitely one of them. I still worry about the offense. Now, I know they put together, finally, Sam Houston State, and they went back to Shoemaker at quarterback. They had Gunnell, the Arizona-Memphis transfer, in the 2 weeks ago, and they went back to Shoemaker at quarterback last week. And, look, he played better, much more efficient. His completion rate was very good. But then in the second half, it went back to the same old Sam Houston State offense we saw most of the season. Couldn't move the football, only scored a touchdown. And then once it got into the fourth quarter, they did nothing on offense and nothing in overtime. It was a quick Jacksonville State got the opening possession, break down the field with the touchdown, and then quick 3-and-out for Sam Houston State. And Jacksonville State wins the game in overtime. So I'm still not sold on this offense, but you don't have to be sold on their offense to take them in this kind of price range. You are talking 19 and a half points. It's a lot of points here for Liberty to be laying here in this game. There's no doubt they're the better team, and you have a 4-0 team matched up against a 0-4 team in this one. You got Liberty that's won and covered, I believe, each and every game this year, 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread, each victory by double digits, Bowling Green by 10. And that Bowling Green win, by the way, looks a little more impressive after seeing what Bowling Green did to Georgia Tech on Saturday, a stunner. Last week. So all of a sudden beating Bowling Green, you thought maybe before last week, that's no big deal. Bowling Green goes into Georgia Tech, beats the Yellow Jackets. So that win means a little more. They win by 16 against New Mexico State, 4 touchdowns at Buffalo, and then a 38-6 beatdown over FIU in their last game. So I'm not sure I want to step in front of Liberty, but you are talking a lot of points. And the one thing about Sam Houston is, they can play defense. And it's funny, the week they finally get their offense going, Conor Mack, the defense falls apart on them. Couldn't stop Jacksonville State, and it was the defense for Sam Houston that was keeping them in all these games in the early part of the season. So I worry. I mean, if that defense, if I can get the defense that I saw against Air Force, and a few of those teams early in the season, BYU, if I can get that Sam Houston defense that I saw in those games, then I might be interested in taking the points. But if I'm going to get the Sam Houston defense I saw last week, where Jacksonville State, once they got it going, they went up and down the field against Sam Houston, that's not going to get it done against Liberty. Liberty's a very balanced offense. Jamie Chadwell's one of the best offensive-minded head coaches in college football. They're averaging 6 yards per rush, 271 rushing yards per game. And if you actually look at the Sam Houston defensive numbers, they've actually been very good against the pass, but the run has been a different story. 184 yards per game allowed on the ground, 4.6 yards per carry. I'm tempted to look over the total here 47, 47.5. Buy in that maybe Shoemaker and the offense got a little something going last week against Jacksonville State, and that maybe they can carry that over. Signs of life from a dormant offense last week in the loss to Jacksonville State. But I don't know if they're going to stop Liberty. And Liberty's putting up big points, C-Mac, 34, 33, 55, 38 in their 4 games. And total's only at 47, 47.5. If Liberty gets their season average into the 30s, you're only going to need like 13, 14 points from Sam Houston to get over the total. So that might be what I look toward, more so the total in this game. Conor, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked as anyone with Sam Houston. That offense just, I was like, is this a totally different guy in Shoemaker? I mean, he threw for like 285. They had 435, I think, total offense in that game. But you're right, the second half just kind of went back to the old ways a little bit. That's one thing. Can they do this on the road? I get, if you've been on Liberty, it's just hard to jump off now. They've just been cashing for you. Salter's been good. You touched on, I want to bring it up, Jamie Chadwell's just done well with this program. It seems like they get around 500 total yards every week. But I think the number's creeping out here. Maybe last week Sam Houston at home was all right with them. They hit the road again. I wish this was a little over 3 touchdowns, but I lean the dog here a little bit with Sam Houston. Take the point.
All right, leaning towards Sam Houston State. Like I said, I'm leaning over. Again, check the weather. We'll see what it's like for this game Thursday night there, but definitely leaning toward points because, like I say, Liberty's been getting 30. And again, Sam Houston's defense, terrific. But the last 2, that's not just the Jacksonville State game, by the way, Conor. It's the Houston game, too, where Sam Houston defensively just got carved up. So starting to worry that defense when they match up against teams with good offensive scheme, good game plan, good offensive teams like a Liberty, they're going to struggle. And I worry about that here. That's why I think the over could get there, and hoping that Keegan Shoemaker and what we saw from him at quarterback for Sam Houston last week, improvement on offense, significant improvement, can continue here in this game against Liberty. And you mentioned Jamie Chadwell. I did as well, Conor, and the job he's doing here at Liberty. All you have to do is look at Coastal Carolina and look what they're doing this year and see how much they miss him there with because to me, you look at Coastal, they don't look like the same team without Jamie Chadwell either this year. So definitely when you look at these programs here, definitely situations where, it's just they miss him. Make no mistake about it here with Coastal Carolina. He did a great job there. And he's going to be one of those coaches probably that everywhere he goes, he's going to end up doing a good job. He's going to be one of those guys that we can count on. I mean, look at Coastal in the Sun Belt right now. They're 2-3 overall, but 0-2 in conference play. And I said this all summer. I'm not a Tim Beck fan. This is a downgrade as far as I'm concerned, coaching-wise. Jamie Chadwell to Tim Beck, and it's playing out that way. Coastal's down, and look at what Liberty's doing with Chadwell there now. That tells you all you need to know so far with that. All right, next up on Thursday, Western Kentucky and Louisiana Tech. We've got another Conference USA matchup, 5.5-point road favorites. Western Kentucky, 59.5 being the total here in this one. Western Kentucky, very impressive. They played a weeknight game last week against Middle Tennessee State, wire-to-wire point spread cover. I was definitely leaning I had a small Hilltoppers bet in that game last week. Actually parlayed Western Kentucky and Jacksonville State together on the money line. And obviously we needed that miraculous comeback from Jacksonville State to cash that. But Western Kentucky was the other leg of that for me. And it was really no sweat, 31-10 victory for the Hilltoppers last week against MTSU. A nice bounce back from them. No shame losing to Troy. No shame losing to Ohio State. So they really haven't had a bad loss. Troy is one of the better teams, obviously, in the Sun Belt. Troy, one of the better defenses in the Sun Belt as well the last couple of years. So not exactly a bad thing to say, wow, Western Kentucky lost to Troy. No, Troy's a very good defensive team, and we see that year in and year out. On the flip side here, you've got Louisiana Tech coming into this game off a victory against UTEP, and I have been negative, Conor Mack, on Louisiana Tech much of the season. But I said after that Nebraska game, well, and look, they're 2-0 ATS since he took over at quarterback. Jack Turner, man, he's better than Hank Bachmeier. I don't want to hear any debate with that. He's better than Hank Bachmeier. I have talked about this ad nauseum on this very show that I have never seen anything out of Hank Bachmeier that tells me, wow, that's a great college quarterback. He underachieved at Boise. He actually was living off one phenomenal performance, and I think it was one of his very first starts at Boise when he played Florida State. It was like a season opener a few years ago. He played great in that game. He had everybody excited. He's done jack shit really ever since then at the quarterback position. And sure enough, Jack Turner has taken over at the quarterback spot here for Louisiana Tech these last 2 weeks. He had a solid enough game on the road against Nebraska, tough place to play. Almost 300 passing yards, only 9 for 20. Not a great completion rate, only 152 passing yards against UTEP. But he didn't make any mistakes on the road. That's what I like to see. You don't hurt your team with turnovers, and Jack Turner didn't do that against UTEP. And he allowed his run game to take over because they had 142 rushing yards led by Tyree Shelton running the ball against UTEP last week. So Louisiana Tech gets the job done. I think that was every bit a fate of UTEP for me as it was backing Louisiana Tech in that game. But Louisiana Tech now 2-0 against the spread since the quarterback change. They've shown some life. Defense has picked it up a little bit. Defense didn't have a good start to the year. They gave up 38 to SMU, 40 to North Texas. Actually holding Nebraska to 28 on the road's not bad. And then, of course, they shut down UTEP. A UTEP offense that is dramatically underachieved, but still a good defensive performance here from Louisiana Tech. We've seen the money come in on Louisiana Tech. Look, I get it. Louisiana Tech has looked like much more of a bet on and a buy team since the quarterback change, and the defense is improving a bit. I think no doubt Western Kentucky is still the better team here, but going on the road and laying almost a touchdown against a team that's starting to show signs of life, signs of improvement, especially at the QB position. I get why people are on Louisiana Tech. I don't know if I'll take Louisiana Tech, but I get it. I like Western Kentucky so much that I probably won't be interested in fading Western Kentucky, at least at this number. If it were to get back up to 7, I might have a peek at Louisiana Tech. At this number, it's kind of difficult, but I do think Louisiana Tech's definitely not as much a bet against team right now with Turner on the field at quarterback compared to Bachmeier for them. C-Mac, what do you think here?
Yeah, Western Kentucky. One thing I think, one strength of La Tech, it's so early though, they haven't played a ton of games, is their pass defense has been pretty good. They've given up like 220 on the ground. I mean, it's like 128th in the country. Not that Western Kentucky doesn't run it, but we know they like to throw it around. And Western Kentucky,
it's not bad for Louisiana Tech in this game because of that. They're much better defensively, pass defense as opposed to run defense, no doubt.
Yeah, at least so I think that gives them a shot here in this one. And one thing with Western Kentucky, at times, they give a ton of penalties. Like if they clean that up, man, I think they could start doing a lot better. And I think the number's too big in this one, especially with Turner in. I think he's the different. You know what he's done, Vivano? I know he threw that pick, but he just take care of the ball. He did it last week. We know UTEP's horrible, and they just kind of did what they had to do there. Won easy on the road. If he takes care of the football, I think La Tech is in it here. So I'm on the points.
And again, this is not just while Western Kentucky is a better passing attack than running it. It's not because they do it better. It's because they pretty much exclusively throw the football. They don't run the football very much, Western Kentucky. Yeah. It's air raid offense. It's always been that way with Shelton there as the head coach there at Helton, I should say, at the quarterbacks, the coaching spot here for Western Kentucky. So they've been a pass-heavy offense, no question about that. And that's why when you handicap Western Kentucky games, you want to know if that opposing team can stop the pass, has a good secondary. And if they don't, they're going to have their issues. There's no question about that. And I think now facing Tyson Helton's offense here, Louisiana Tech has shown, a halfway decent pass defense this year. So definitely makes me think, if Turner doesn't commit turnovers, they're at home, on a weeknight game. So it should be a decent atmosphere in Ruston, Louisiana for this game. So I think there's reasons to like the home dog here, and the betting markets sure do because the money has come in on La Tech here early in the week. All right, next up, we go to Friday night in the Big 12. It's Kansas State and Oklahoma State. Kansas State, 11.5-point road favorites in Stillwater, 55 being the total in this one. Of course, for Oklahoma State, they're a very, I would say, unimpressive 2-2. to start the year. Their wins were Central Arkansas and Arizona State. And Arizona State, we know, has a ton of issues right now. And then the last 2 weeks, blown out at home by South Alabama, 33-7. And then a road loss at Iowa State. And you give up 34 points to an Iowa State offense that really hadn't shown much prior to that game. So there's issues right now for Mike Gundy's team. Every single week this season, he had gone to multiple quarterbacks. He had played all three. Alan Bowman, his son Gunnar Gundy, Garrett Rangel. He gave all three opportunities to play. Finally, at least in the Iowa State game, even though they lost, he committed finally to one quarterback. Alan Bowman played that entire game, the Texas Tech transfer. Again, his actually percentage is not great, 23 of 48, threw 48 times. And, of course, they only ran 24 times. And I know Oklahoma State was trying to commit to the run more this season. So much for that. They basically threw the ball 2 times more than they ran it against Iowa State, double the amount. 23 of 48, 278 through the air, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Again, 2 costly interceptions, too, for Bowman in that game. Not going to be easy here taking on K-State, coming off a 44-31 win a couple weeks ago at home against UCF. Both of these teams, again, off a bye week here, so there's no advantage there. Extra time to prepare for both Chris Kleiman and Mike Gundy, both head coaches going into this game. Kansas State on the road, I don't know if I want to lay this many, though. There's no doubt I think Kansas State is the superior team. They have shown some warts on defense here the last couple weeks. Can Oklahoma State's, suspect offense, I guess you could say, exploit that? Because they did give up 30 in the loss to Missouri a few weeks ago, Kansas State on the road, and then 31 against UCF, even though they won that game. When you look at the matchups here, though, for Oklahoma State on offense, they have been unable to throw the ball consistently or effectively well this season. If you look at it, on offense here, and they haven't been able to run it at all. Actually, throwing it, they've been a little bit better, but for the rushing attack is not going to work here. They're only rushing for 4.2 yards per carry. They're only rushing for 121 per game. That's 106th in the country. Kansas State, that's the strength of their defense, is stopping the run. So that run game is not going to work. It's going to be a one-dimensional offense probably for Oklahoma State, and they're going to have to throw the football. Can they do it here? It's probably going to be Alan Bowman again. I have no reason to doubt it. I think he's the most experienced quarterback. Doesn't mean he's any good, and we're still waiting to see if he can get this offense going. But I think Mike Gundy showed in the Iowa State game that, Bowman is going to get the opportunity here. Now they face Kansas State. The number's tall. Mike Gundy's good in the dog roll. I will say that. Although last week that was not the case against Iowa State. When he's a bigger dog, he's been really good. But I just don't know if I can back this team right now with what I'm seeing from them. Really, no run game, inconsistency at quarterback, defense, which was good early in the season, but then they play some better offenses. And how do you give up 34 to Iowa State? That concerns me. If they play that bad against Kansas State's at least scoring 34 with Will Howard and that offense. They will absolutely score that same amount. So tough game for me. As of right now, I'm likely to pass. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, it is tough because this Cowboys team isn't any of those teams of the past, when he was a dog. And the points they've given up is a problem. Even the beatdown to South Alabama. And we've seen them not a couple weeks later, not so great, and they only scored 7 points at home in that game. We talked about it earlier in these shows, the weeks. I hated the 3 quarterbacks. It's just like, you can't do that long term. Like, you maybe get away with it for a game or two. So I think they got to stick with Bowman for the most part in this one. But I think Howard, one thing, they're just not the same team away from Manhattan. I've never loved laying points with them, but they should be able to run it here on them. Will Howard should be able to throw it around. Maybe in the week I'll look at a team total. There's no signs right now. It's a big game at night, but yeah, right now I'm off,
Yeah, I think it's just the numbers in a decent spot. I think if I had to, I'd lay the points because I think this could get away from Oklahoma. They lost 33-7 at home to South Alabama. And look, South Alabama's not been quite the team I expected coming into this season. That same South Bama team went in there and beat them in Stillwater 33-7. So that's why it's hard for me to take Oklahoma State. Like I say, if I had to make a bet here, I'd lay the points. I just don't trust what I'm seeing here from this Oklahoma State team right now. And yeah, Kansas State team total might be the move. Now, and might be the better option if you like Kansas State. Just look at the team total, because I do think they're going to be able to score theirs here against Oklahoma State. All right, next up, the final game for the weeknight portion of the college football card, Nebraska and Illinois, Big Ten action also on Friday night. We've got Illinois 3.5-point home favorites, 44.5 the total in this one. I'm officially at the point now where I'm very not just a little worried. I'm not cashing the Illinois win total over this year. I thought they would not. I thought they'd be okay losing Tommy DeVito. I thought they'd be okay losing Chase Brown, their quarterback and running back combination from last year. I thought still that Brett Bielema had gotten this program to a point where, hey, they'd be able to still survive and be a pretty good team in a Big Ten that's very muddled, as we all know. But the more we watch Illinois, the more you just got to admit they're not a very good football team right now. They haven't covered a point spread this year either. 0-5 against the spread for Illinois coming into this game. They have yet to cover a number. They barely beat Toledo by 2 at home, 7.5-point favorites, don't cover. They lose at Kansas, lose to Penn State, 30-13. Another one of those instances, though, where James Franklin's trying to cover the number late in the game, and we saw that again last week with the I mean, that's insane. What you just got to know about it now, that this guy will do anything it takes to cover the point spread at the end of a game for Penn State.
I think he didn't like it in the past, you know, the chirping. So he's like, I'm gonna shove it and do this, try to cover every time. I know what the number is.
Oh, he does. Don't you dare tell me these coaches don't know. They know. Trust me, what the point spread is in their respective games, especially. So they lost to Penn State, failed to cover. 23-17, very unimpressive performance against Florida Atlantic, who another team, even with Tom Herman there, have kind of underwhelmed me this year. And they only won that game 23-17. And then, of course, last week against Purdue, I mean, that might be rock bottom. I mean, Purdue doesn't have a great defense at all. And this Illinois team is still struggling to score points. You know, Altmaier got benched. It had to happen at some point, and I thought he'd be a lot better coming from Ole Miss, transferring over. I wasn't expecting him to be a phenomenal quarterback, but I sure as fuck thought he'd be a lot better than this. He has not been. John Paddock ends up taking over, so you got major quarterback question marks for Illinois. Who does Bielema start on Friday night? Luke Altmaier, who's been struggling all year, or John Paddock, who took over in the Purdue loss. And then to give up 44 points on defense. This has also been the other problem with Illinois. Bad quarterback play. They haven't run the football as well this year. And then the defense hasn't been anywhere close to as good. And I know they lost a lot of NFL talent on defense. That was a defense that had some NFL talent on it last year for Illinois, no question. But to fall off like this from last year to this year on defense is alarming. You know, 28 to Toledo, 34 allowed to Kansas, 30 allowed to Penn State, 44 last week to Purdue. And now they're favored here. And I know they're at home, Illinois, in this game. There's no way I'm laying 3.5 with Illinois right now. I've yet to cover a point spread. When you've gone this deep into the season, CMAC, if you're an 0-5 or 0-4 ATS team, I am not looking to back you and bet on you until you prove to me you can cover a damn point spread. That simple as that. Until you prove to me you can cover a damn point spread, I am not backing you if you're a 0-4 ATS team this deep into the season. That tells me the betting markets were off on how good or bad you were, and it's taken this long to catch up to it. And then conversely, if you're a perfect ATS team, you've covered every number this year, I'm not looking to go against you until I see you fail to cover a point spread. That's the way I treat it with these teams that have covered every number, or these teams like Illinois that have not yet covered a point spread this year. I am not backing you until you give me a reason to back you. And right now, Illinois is just not giving me enough. I'm definitely considering Conor Mack, Nebraska here, plus 3.5. I know they can be tricky to trust here. They're off a blowout loss to Michigan, but let's be real. Were they really going to compete in the trenches with Michigan, Nebraska? No, they were not. And they end up getting blown out 45-7. Let's not forget that on the road this year, Matt Rule's team went to Minnesota and should have beaten the Gophers in that first game, 13-10 loss. They probably should have won that game. I thought they outplayed Minnesota. And then the Colorado game, you know, don't be fooled by the final score, 36-14. Dion and company, it got away from Nebraska in the second half of that game. But remember, Jeff Sims was just he shit the bed like harder than I've ever seen a quarterback.
Can't complete passes.
Yeah, I remember that game. And that's what got away. I thought the defense for Nebraska actually played pretty well. They hung in there against Colorado for a large part of that game. And with better quarterback play, it probably would have been tighter than 36-14 in that game for Nebraska. And look, they've got issues at quarterback too. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Heinrich Haarberg is the next coming of Scott Frost at quarterback for Nebraska here. But I think they have to stick with him because I know I've seen enough of Sims to tell me he can't play. He can't be trusted with ball security. He can't be trusted to not turn over the football. So I think you're stuck here with Nebraska. You got to keep rocking and rolling here with Heinrich Haarberg at quarterback moving forward for this team. So I think it'll probably be Haarberg again. But let's be real. Haarberg, since he's taken over, he's had to play, Louisiana Tech and especially that Michigan game. If anything else, even though the offense struggled, it's going to toughen you up for the rest of the Big Ten schedule when you play a defense like Michigan. So I'm certainly leaning to the points here with the Cornhuskers. And as far as the total goes, very difficult to look at this as anything but an under. And I know Illinois' defense has been very leaky, and that game with Purdue flew over the total, but it's very difficult to trust the two quarterbacks and the two offenses here in this game. So I would lean under as far as this total is concerned. What do you think here, Conor? Nebraska, Illinois?
Yeah, they have to stick, with Haarberg, and hopefully he can just, especially his passing can get a little bit better, but he can run. And yeah, they just got drubbed by Michigan. Just they weren't ready to play, got blown off the ball. It was just over right away. Illinois, let's get to them. This is a desperate game right here. They've just been horrible. Just been very bad. You talked about bad against the number, but the hook, I don't love that because this is like a must-win game here. That's probably huge for Illinois, but I can't lay 3.5. Not when this defense gives up 30 points a game, just getting gashed. They rank 105th. They could be even worse, I think, especially that I've seen. That Kansas game was bad. I thought the best game when we mentioned last week was Penn State for about a half, and Allmeyer threw 4 interceptions. He can't be trusted. So, yeah, do you stick with him? Just ugly. This one's just ugly. I don't have no play Monday morning on this fucking game.
Yeah, it's funny. Rance in our chat asking, where did Casey Thompson he's talking about go? He is better than both of these dudes talking about at Nebraska for quarterback. He transferred to Florida Atlantic. Tom Herman poached him, brought him to Florida Atlantic, made him the starting quarterback there, and he didn't play great. He was kind of up and down at Florida Atlantic, and then he gets hurt, knee injury, and out for the season now at Florida Atlantic for Casey Thompson.
Yeah, so that's his problem.
Yeah,
injuries, Casey Thompson.
So that's where Casey Thompson's basically on the shelf. That's where he is, down in Boca Raton. Probably checking out some of the clubs down there now that he's hurt and can't play football. Something like that down there for Casey Thompson. And Daniel Richardson, by the way, has taken over the Central Michigan transfer at quarterback for Florida Atlantic.
Yeah.
And actually didn't play that bad in this against Illinois, and he's got a lot of experience. You'll say that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Casey Thompson, that's where he is. Florida Atlantic started the season there, started the first few games, then got hurt, out for the season now for Florida Atlantic. So very unfortunate. All right, let's turn our attention to Saturday and the next slate of games. A shout out, by the way, first to everyone in the chat. Hit the like button. We love doing this show, giving you all kinds of great information and analysis early in the week for the upcoming college football slate. So make sure you hit that like button and show the love for the show because we love doing the show each and every Monday here on Hitting the Books on Pub Sports Radio. All right, UCF and Kansas. We've got Kansas 3.5 point home favorites, 62.5 the total. Keep an eye on the situation with the quarterback. Surprising development, because you never know. You can't buy into what any coach says anymore as far as injuries are concerned. We had no idea Jalen Daniels was really in question to play against Texas, and sure enough, last moment he ends up not playing. Back tightness for the quarterback, and they end up going with Jason Bean at quarterback against Texas last week. And I'm not saying that's why Kansas lost, but the offense is not nearly as good, obviously, with Jason Bean. compared to Jalen Daniels. So, and from what I've seen, Jalen Daniels did not participate in the first practice of the week on Monday prior to this UCF game. So we'll keep an eye on that. The point spread will go up if Jalen Daniels plays. That being said, Bean again, think about the situation. Bean is very experienced, okay? Jason Bean has started a bunch of games. He was initially at North Texas in his career. He got into 10 games at Kansas 2 years ago, 11 last year, and his numbers weren't bad. At Kansas, Conor Mack, he has a grand total of 23 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. That's not bad for a guy that we think of as a backup quarterback going into this game here. And now he's at home, and he's facing a UCF defense that I just saw piss their pants and give up this massive lead to Baylor, albeit they did have Blake Shapen returning from injury at quarterback in that game. But that can't happen if your Gus Malzahn. You can't have that kind of a loss. You got to fucking finish that game. And you can tell I'm frustrated. I had a piece of UCF laying the points against Baylor and just completely melted down in the fourth quarter. Of course, that defensive touchdown that Baylor got, that scoop and score fumble, that really, really changed the game and turned it in Baylor's favor. All the momentum was on their side, and that's when it really hit me that they're going to find a way to lose this game. There's no question about that. And what's a shame is, Timmy McClain, who's been filling in for the injured John Rice Plumlee, didn't play that bad. I thought for a UCF defense let him down really more than anything in that game. So we'll see who's at quarterback for both of these teams. Could be Daniels, could be Bean for Kansas. Could be Plumlee, could be McClain once again here for UCF in this game. He's questionable right now, and we'll see if he's able to practice this week. But Timmy McClain, like I say, against Baylor, I don't think he was that bad, and they were able to run the football. But 36-35 loss, that is a horrific loss for UCF, considering that they were in control for much of that game. I still lean Kansas, and hell, if Jason Bean plays, he's at home. He's not facing this terrific Texas defense anymore. Because remember, that's the Texas defense on the road. Now it's the UCF defense at home. I think Jason Bean, even if he's the starter, you're going to get a better point spread with Kansas. He's capable. He's at home. His numbers aren't great. He's going to have all week to practice because Jalen Daniels, still hasn't practiced as of Monday. So he's going to have more comfort, more continuity with the first team offense. I think I would still look to Kansas here, -3.5, regardless of whether it's Jason Bean or Jalen Daniels at quarterback. What do you think here, Connor? Interesting Big 12 matchup, UCF, Kansas.
Yeah, I think it's fine if Bean is in and, after getting their ass kicked, this is, I like them a lot better at home. And Daniels, it's just tough. Is this guy ever going to be fully healthy? Just when you thought he's got some games and just right before kickoff, he's out. Man, I hate that shit, especially if you are betting, on those games. But let's go to UCF. It should be McClain again. I don't think Plumlee will be back this week. I mean, maybe, but I think it'll still be him. I thought he came out great. I didn't bet the game, man, but we talked about it last week. I would have laid it, and I'm like, wow, they're kicking ass. And it's 35-10. I have to give it, not only their defense was horrible, but I hate the play calling when you're up like that. It's just, everything folded. You talked about the scripted score, but both sides of the ball, they just collapsed. I mean, 26-0 was that fourth quarter, and Baylor wins. Just a crushing loss. So they should be pumped, but I'd want them back at home. I can't take UCF. I've never loved them on the road away from the bounce house. So I'm with you. Still got a lot of question marks, but I lean with Kansas late at home.
All right, Marshall and NC State. We've got NC State 6.5-point home favorites, 45 being the total in this game. Laying points with NC State. That's an interesting proposition, to put it mildly, with what we have seen this year. Very disappointing season so far for Dave Doran and company. Although I was disappointed we couldn't get at least another point from Louisville, margin of victory last week, as I get a push with Louisville -3. I'll tell you what, the defense was a little bit better last week. I mean, they frustrated Louisville for a large part of that team, but the offense continues to be a big time issue here for NC State. It just hasn't been that return of the magic we saw at Virginia between Robert and I, offensive coordinator, and Brennan Armstrong. They just have not been able to recapture that magic and that chemistry they had in Virginia a couple years ago. And I'm looking at the depth chart here for NC State, and I was wondering, as much as he's got the experience and it's his offensive coordinator from Virginia, and they were great there, is there going to come a point where Dave Doeren makes a quarterback change? Because clearly Brennan Armstrong's not playing well enough.
I hear it.
Change.
Babano. Yeah, I just see it here.
MJ Morris. Yeah, MJ Morris is going to be the starting quarterback, taking over, announced by Dave Doeren, promoted to the starter following another disappointing performance from Brennan Armstrong and the offense. So MJ Morris will be at quarterback against Marshall. This is a guy that got into 5 games last year for NC State. He started some games last year for NC State, if you'll remember, back when Devin Leary was injured last season for the Wolfpack. And last year he had a 52 for 86 completion rate, 60.5% completions, 648 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, man. That's a really good touchdown to interception ratio for MJ Morris when he was the starting quarterback for NC State last year. So, I only noticed and I only recognized the quarterback change after I had seen the initial move in the line up from 6 to 6.5, like they're really betting NC State. And then I saw, they changed quarterbacks. And then I looked at Morris's stats from last year. 60% completions, almost 700 passing yards in 5 games, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, took care of the football. I mean, so now it makes a little more sense why people are a little more bullish now on NC State. Marshall, meanwhile, look, their defense has been terrific most of the season, but you played Albany, you played East Carolina, you played Virginia Tech. Is this defense truly great, or did they feast on a bunch of weak, anemic offenses, early in the season? You have to ask yourself that. And when you look at Marshall here, they played Old Dominion last week and they got gashed, albeit they survived a 41-35 win, but by far the worst defensive performance they've had. They let Kadarius Callaway just go wild running the football for ODU against them. Cam Fancher at quarterback for Marshall. Dual threat, can throw, can run. His numbers on the year pretty solid overall here for Marshall this year. 70.4% completions, good completion rate. Does have to cut down on the interceptions, though. 4 touchdowns and the same amount of interceptions as well for Fancher going into this game. I'm going to be proactive here and say, let's go over the total with Marshall and NC State. Total's only 45, 45 and a half, 46 in some spots. You got a Marshall team that offensively it's been solid this year, 41, 24, 31 in their last 3 games. We know NC State's a little bit down on defense, but this is buying low on the quarterback change for the NC State offense with MJ Morris, which it can only be an upgrade. It can only be an improvement as far as I'm concerned with the NC State offense, because it just was not working with Brennan Armstrong in the first few games. So let's buy in on the quarterback change, that maybe it's a spark for the NC State offense. And again, the Marshall defensive numbers overall still look pretty good, but this was a Marshall defense that faced, like I say, Albany, East Carolina. These are some horrible offenses that they feasted on Marshall. And then they faced Old Dominion last week, and they gave up 35 points, and they ran all over them in that football game. And by the way, if you look at NC State's offensive numbers this season, we'll see how they fare here in this one. But they are not a great rushing team, but they're going to be able to run it here, I think, against Marshall a little bit here in this game. And I think they want to. And MJ Morris is more of a mobile quarterback. So I think the run element of this offense is going to become even more predominant for NC State now with MJ Morris at quarterback. So I'm going to be proactive here. Over the total for me, Marshall and NC State. That Marshall's defensive numbers are phony because they played a bunch of cupcake offenses early in the year, Albany, East Carolina, Virginia Tech. And again, I think NC State gets a boost offensively here from the quarterback change. And like I say, Fancher and the Marshall offense, I think, can score enough here as well. Their offense has been pretty solid. So I'm going to go over a low total. Conor's back. What do you think here, Conor? Marshall, NC State.
Marshall, just going back to last year, it just keeps winning. I think they've won 9 in a row. I thought last week, though, they were exposed. I wish I had a lot more money. It kind of was a late play. I thought Old Dominion. That's the 3rd time I took ODU, and they covered. I was on them too. Yep. Were you? Yeah. I thought it was a ton of points, but 339 they ran on it. That's if Marshall gives up that here, then NC State. And I like the move to Morris. It's about time. I think they were holding on there, trying to make it work with Armstrong. So I think I love the move to him. I lean to lay it. Marshall is just, they've got all these decent wins, going back to last year, App State, Virginia Tech. But I kind of lean to lay the touchdown here with NC State.
Yeah, and to me, I love these spots where you've got an offense that can't get out of their own way, stuck in mud. Nobody wants anything to do with probably NC State or an under in this game because of it. But now they make the quarterback change, and I like that because and who knows if it's going to work all season with MJ Morris, but oftentimes, at least for that one game, that first game, you're going to see a spark. You're going to see, some pop in that offense, and I think we're going to see that here from NC State.
It's good it's at home, too.
Proactive approach to this game for me.
Yeah, I like that they do it, good at home. Yeah, here he's not going on the road in a tough spot.
Exactly, home game as well. That certainly doesn't hurt either. All right, next up, we've got Vanderbilt and Florida in the next game. Florida, 18.5-point home favorites, 54 being the total in this game. When you look at this Florida Gators team, that was just a awful game for them against Kentucky. I actually took a small piece of Kentucky. Once that game dropped to -1 with Kentucky, and look, I know Florida had the great win against Tennessee, but that was at home. They really hadn't proven anything to me on the road, other than losing by 13 at Utah without Cam Rising. I'm like, we really going to trust Florida on the road? I think Kentucky's a pretty good defense, pretty good team. And sure enough, Florida could not hang with Kentucky. 33-14. What shocked me, absolutely shocked me, is we're singing the praises of this Florida defensive coordinator, who was a nice hire. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue here's Kentucky racking up with Ray Davis, 280 rushing yards against this Florida defense, which had been pretty good, believe it or not, up until last week against Kentucky. So brutal. Could not stop the run. And that obviously opened things up in the passing game for Leary a little bit. And Leary didn't even have to do much. 9 for 19, 69 yards, because that run game was just working so well. Now, can Florida fix it? Here, that run defense against Vanderbilt. Good news is Vanderbilt has not been able to run the ball this year. 3.5 yards per carry on average for this Vandy offense. So that means that maybe they can get the run defense shored up here in this game. On offense for Florida, it continues to be spotty. Some good, some bad from the offense. Some good, some bad from Graham Mertz at quarterback. His completion rate was pretty good. He only had 5 incomplete passes, 244 through the air. Did have 1 interception as well. Did take some sacks. The O-line wasn't exactly very good for Florida either against Kentucky. It's a huge step down, though, in class when you go from Kentucky's defense to Vandy's defense, which continues to struggle. And here's another team, C-Mac. I talked about it. I am not taking a team that has failed to cover a point spread yet until they show me they can cover a number. And here's Vanderbilt, 0-6 against the spread this year, including the Hawaii game back in August. So they have not been able to cover a number. Florida or nothing, but am I running to lay 18.5 with Florida? Probably not. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, I don't want to lay 18.5, and they might get the cover in this one. In Florida, over the last few years, some of these bigger games where they've been big favorites, they just haven't covered. But they should to do whatever they want. This Vanderbilt defense isn't great. I don't know. Seals should be in. I thought he did all right, and they were hanging on a little bit to the cover. There was a late touchdown. It had the game over, so that was good. That touchdown got that game over with Missouri. Yeah, I can't take Vandy here. Not in this spot. They could be 0-7. Can they finally get a win? I doubt it. And with this total, I think the Florida defense comes up big. So I'm going to stay off the total. But a Vandy game, over or nothing. I think it's 4-0 with it. So.
I know. I would actually lean over the total here. I think Florida's going to get that offense rolling here at home.
Big game, score 40+.
Yeah, they've already faced. I think I would put Kentucky. I would certainly put Utah like a top 10 defense, and I would probably put Kentucky, top 25, top 30 defense in college football. I would say Kentucky's probably there. They've had to face some pretty good defenses, Florida, and they're facing a Swiss cheese defense here in comparison to the likes of Utah and Kentucky. So I think over the total, I might get there with that here, and hopefully Vandy can do enough. And remember, Florida suddenly vulnerable against the run last week, and like I say, that's going to help now because Vanderbilt changed to Ken Seals at quarterback, and Ken Seals is more of a running quarterback, less of a throwing quarterback. So that's that mobile quarterback element that Vandy throws at them if Seals starts again. Could be an issue for a Florida team that started again last week, gave up a lot of yards on the ground. All right, Syracuse and North Carolina, another team that really disappointed me last week was Syracuse. 8.5-point home favorites, North Carolina, 59 the total, to the point where I'm hesitant to get back to the well with Syracuse. I mean, they faced a Clemson team that was coming off the absolutely gut-wrenching loss to Florida State. It was their second loss of the season. It had knocked them out of the national championship playoff picture, and it probably really hurt their chances to win the ACC as well, because that's already 2 ACC losses for Clemson this year. And yet Syracuse was gift-wrapped at home, huge game, big spotlight, this potentially downtrodden Clemson team, and they couldn't get out of their own way early in that game. The fumbles, the turnovers early in that game. And I'm like, right away, and I had Syracuse plus the points there. I'm like, this isn't good. I have a bad feeling. They came out, they were tight. They were, again, turnovers, costly mistakes, gifting Clemson early points in that game, and they just never recovered from it. They got back into the game a little bit, but the offense just kept moving the ball, matriculating the ball, and then they get to midfield, they'd have to punt, or they'd take a sack, or they'd take a penalty and bounce their way out of field goal. I mean, it was just that kind of day for Syracuse.
Reminds me of the Panthers.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the defense got worn down later in that game by Clemson in the fourth quarter, and that was all she wrote. So very disappointing performance from Syracuse, and what I thought was a really good spot for them. So I'm having a hard time, trusting them again here now on the road against a North Carolina team. Look, the defense I thought for Syracuse wasn't the reason they lost. It was everything. It was a little of the defense's fault, the offense's fault, the turnovers. But the way they got worn down by Clemson and given up 31 points, I worry about that against what we know is just a phenomenal North Carolina offense. Drake May and company can light it up. And I worry about that happening here. And don't look now, I always said you can't really trust North Carolina as a favorite. They had that one game against App State where they were huge favorites and they barely won the game in overtime, 40-34. But outside of that, when they've been favored, win and cover against South Carolina, win and cover against Minnesota, win and cover against Pitt, and off a bye week, by the way, North Carolina as well. So an advantage for Mac Brown and the coaching staff here, extra time to prepare for this game. So not saying I'd lay 8.5, but I'd prefer laying the points here. I really not down on Syracuse and really just fed up with them. But, that was an eye-opening bad performance last week against Clemson in a spot where I thought they could take advantage. And it's not going to get any easier now with a rested North Carolina team taking on. And the one thing about Syracuse, we saw it in the Clemson game, they are not a team that can play catch-up. As much as I like, the quarterback, and he's shown a lot of growth at the position here for Syracuse the last couple of years. And Dino Babers trying to play fast here with Garrett Schrader. This is still an offense that's got to keep the game close. They get behind by 14 points, 17 points like they did against Clemson. That's not the kind of game they want to be in, and they struggle. And if they fall behind in this game against North Carolina, albeit North Carolina does have a defense that can be leaky, I would be worried about that if I'm the Cuse. What do you think here, C-Mac, Syracuse, UNC?
Yeah, this is one just going through last night because I had Syracuse as well. And they just, those fumbles early. You're right. They're just a team. You don't want to be down 14-0 early. And I like Schrader, but he's just, he's not all there. He can run it well. He's a decent passer. Yeah, he made a bad pick there. And the Syracuse defense, I thought it could have made a few more plays, bad penalties. That was just rough. That was rough to watch.
That's been the criticism of Dino Babers. Some of these big games, and it's like they weren't even prepared, and they're making mistakes.
And everything they said, they were ready to go. Yeah. From what he's like, we're so pumped for this, ready to rock and roll, did Babers. But North Carolina, I do like them off the bye in this game. I thought the total here, I kind of lean under. I want to go look at it a little more this week. North Carolina, not a crazy over team, at least early on, and gotten in crazy shootouts. So, if this is in the 60 points right here, I'd look at the under. I think they want to slow it down because I think their defense is a little bit better and could keep this a little bit low scoring.
I think so too. That App State game still alarms me, but really, other than
Mm-hmm.
that, they played a lot better. I agree with that. The South Carolina game, they played well. Minnesota doesn't have a great offense, and Pitt doesn't either. But they have played better. We're going to find out because I think Syracuse still has a capable offense, and as much as I think UNC's defense has improved, still probably have to say Clemson's defense is better than North Carolina. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Syracuse moved the ball on this UNC team. All right, next up, as we continue along, Kentucky, Georgia. We've got Georgia 14.5-point home favorites, 47.5 being the total in this game. I'm very tempted to take the 14.5 here with Kentucky. I really am. I hope. I don't want to hear letdown. There shouldn't be a letdown. This is Georgia, folks. This is Georgia, your opponent. You shouldn't have a letdown after a big win if you're Kentucky. You should be ready to go. But I'm at the point now with this Georgia team. I've seen enough sloppiness. I've seen enough mistakes. I've seen enough offensive inconsistency from Carson Beck at quarterback and the offense in general, which was stuck in mud for well into the second half of that game against Auburn last week at home, I might add, or it was in Auburn, I should say. But still, I mean, that was not a fluid performance. They've been an overvalued commodity all year. They've covered just 1 point spread, and it was by the skin of their teeth against Ball State. You know, they covered by the hook, 41.5-point favorites. They won by 42. Other than that, they haven't covered a number, including against the Power 5. South Carolina, they only won by 10 as 26-point favorites. 14-point road favorites at Auburn last week. Didn't sniff a point spread cover in that game. So I thought Georgia would turn it up last week against Auburn. And plus, that's an Auburn team that had struggled, Conor Mack. They should have lost to California early in the season, Auburn. And yet there's Georgia struggling to pull away and gain separation against Auburn last week. Now, look, the thing that really worries me for Kentucky, even though they're undefeated, 5-0, 4-1 ATS, Devin Leary's got to step it up. You know, if they're going to cover this point spread, can I count on them to get 280 on the ground from Ray Davis like they had against Florida? I'm not so sure about that against this Georgia run defense. So can Devin Leary step up, make the throws he should make, and keep these drives alive, keep the chains moving when it gets to those second and third down situations here? Because those are going to be the critical plays in the football game that give Kentucky a chance to stay within 2 touchdowns. But I ain't laying 14.5 with Georgia, not when you've only covered 1 point spread this year, and it was by the narrowest of margins against a really bad Ball State team. So I'm leaning I'm leaning Kentucky right now, plus 14.5. I've just seen no indication of Georgia, putting their foot on the throat. And to me, you compare Kentucky to Auburn, I think Kentucky's a better football team than Auburn. I certainly think Kentucky on defense is a little bit better than Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at the offense, Leary, I think I expected more out of Leary. I'll be honest, he has not overly impressed me this year, Leary, for as experienced as he is and all those years at NC State. But he knows in this offense, he just has to rely on the defense, rely on Ray Davis, and don't make mistakes. I'll tell you what, if Devin Leary's stat line has 0 interceptions in this game against Georgia, they're going to cover, I think. And stay within 2. If he doesn't make mistakes, I think Kentucky can stay within 2 touchdowns here. Conor, what do you think here, this SEC match?
Yeah, I'll get to it. But this game, though, first, because we see it in college football all the time, especially like with Kentucky. They're 5-0, huge win. Now they go on the road, and everyone's down on Georgia, and they could get blown out here, which I don't think happens this time, but that's just the classic move I think this game could have with Kentucky going on the road. One thing was Peyton Thorne, obviously he can't throw it, but he ran it well because that's what he's got to do, something he didn't do against A&M, and they ran for over 220 yards. So if Auburn, they were shoving them around, especially early in that first quarter, first half. If Kentucky can do that, and Ray Davis, and then maybe not 280 yards. I mean, he had like 210 at halftime, but if he runs for over 150 at least, I think Kentucky, it's just too many points in this game. I think it can hang around. I've just seen Kentucky do this though in the past, so I'm a little leery.
Yeah, I mean,
you're right with Devin though. If he can throw, no picks, probably just 200 yards, something like that, they should be right in the game.
But I can't guarantee he does that. That's the thing, because, let's be real. Florida's a nice win. Vanderbilt's a nice win for Kentucky the last 2 weeks. And I'll still put Georgia's defense leaps and bounds ahead of both of those teams' defense leaps and bounds. So can he navigate these waters on the road in between the edges and not turn the ball over? That's going to be critical for Kentucky. It's a great matchup, though. It's basically your de facto first place battle in the SEC East right now here, Kentucky and Georgia. So let's see if Kentucky's ready for this moment. I mean, Mark Stoops has gradually built this program up and up, just slowly, gradually, to a point where they're in a spot like this. We're ready to take on the big dog, no pun intended here, in the SEC. Let's see how they fare here on the road. I mean, this is going to be one of the bigger Kentucky football games I can remember. Yeah,
this is a little different. They've been better, though, on the road. Obviously, number one team in the country going there. But I like how Kentucky's played, even going back to last year in some of these bigger games, at least on the road, where they, maybe sometimes just be out flat or lay an egg.
And I mentioned liking Kentucky a little bit, plus 14.5. The under might even be a better play in this game. I could definitely see that here. Auburn, Georgia, that was one where I even talked about it. This might be a good under. And did that one slide over? It depends on what you got.
I pushed
7. Yeah.
And
it dropped to 44.5. So if you bet the under late in that game, you would have lost. It just barely went over. But I still lean under in this game. I think it probably is a game that could be a little low scoring. All right, next up, as we continue along, we got Notre Dame and Louisville. Notre Dame here laying 6.5 point home favorites, 51.5 the total in this game. I like over the total in this game more than anything as far as the side goes. And keep in mind, Notre Dame, they have been banged up at the wide receiver position here the last couple of weeks. What a thrilling game, thrilling conclusion. Horrifying if you had Duke in that game, but it was a thrilling finish. But Notre Dame pulls it out and gets the victory against Duke. And remember, they've been banged up at wide receiver a little bit, but Jaden Thomas is expected to return from injury for this game for Notre Dame. That's significant. He's one of their better receivers. No question about that. Huge news for the Fighting Irish. And also going into this game, Jaden Greathouse also expected to play, and he's been battling injury. So all of a sudden you've got, even though Deion Colsey's still out, you've got Jaden Thomas back, and then you have Greathouse back, and to go with Tobias Merriweather and Chris Tyree. And, all of a sudden you've got a really good receiving core here for Sam Hartman and this Notre Dame offense moving forward. So I think they can put some points on the board. The Louisville defense played great last week, but we talked about the issues with NC State on offense. So you have to take that performance with a little bit of a grain of salt. I do like the Louisville offense. They moved the ball, and then they had some turnovers and they had some penalties. It was not their most crisp, clean execution type of game, but still, I think, a pretty good Louisville offense with Plummer, with Jawar Jordan, and with a good receiving core as well going into this game. We'll see if Louisville's ready for this kind of opponent. As much as I like Jeff Brom and the great 5-0 start, Georgia Tech, who's been kind of exposed as a defensive fraud at the very least, that's a bad Georgia Tech defense. There's no question about that. Murray State, Indiana's having issues. They just fired their offensive coordinator. Boston College, NC State, look at that schedule. The more you look at that Louisville schedule, it's like, holy shit, Notre Dame is by far, it's not even close, the best opponent, the best team they've played so far this season. So I don't know if I'd need at least a full touchdown, at least, to try to get to Louisville here in this game. But I like the over, 51.5. I think we can see points. We can see enough offense from Plummer and Louisville at home. And I think Sam Hartman now with the full allotment, or at least a much healthier assortment of wide receivers, they're going to be able to move this football as well. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, I want to see if they can, because Notre Dame's defense is good. I think they're a top 20 defense really right good. Around there. So, in the unders, were money even last week with Duke, and that was a tough loss. After they lose it to have that big win, and I thought Duke had it there. Big first down, Hartman runs it, and then you don't even get the cover. Which I thought if Notre Dame pulled off that win, that would have been over a touchdown. They lose, and it was that was tough with last week. But I lost that one. I had Duke money line as well. Yeah, there's another game on the road. This seems like I need a few more points with Louisville. here, because can we trust them? In the years past, they haven't won the big game. You know, they come out, sneak by NC State last week after being down 10-0 at halftime. This is a big one. I'd like to take the dog here, but I don't know if I can get there. And until anything else, I'd be on the opposite side. I'd lean under. It's just the Louisville. You know, can their defense stop Notre Dame, which just hasn't been crazy explosive this year.
Yeah, and I believe this is the ABC game Saturday night, 7:30 ABC. So it could be the Fowler-Herb Street game, if I'm not mistaken, just like it was last week for Notre Dame with the Duke game. Although it wasn't Fowler, because Fowler was over in London doing the NFL game. It was Reese Davis filled in, but Fowler will be back.
Yeah, Reese Davis is on it.
Yeah, with Herbie. I think they'll be doing this game. No, so it's a big one. That tells you all you need to know. It's one of the bigger Louisville games in a long time. There's no question. But I just don't. The more I look at that Louisville schedule, the more I'm worried. I mean, they have not faced anyone like Notre Dame so far this year. All right, next up, we've got Wake Forest and Clemson on the radar. Clemson 21-point home favorites, 52.5 the total in this game. I'm not at the point where I'm laying 21 with Clemson. And I know they won, and I know they covered last week on the road at Syracuse. All right, credit to them. Although, like I say, I think those early screw-ups by Syracuse, put it this way, you erase those turnovers and Syracuse scores the first touchdown, then Clemson starts to maybe get down on themselves and, oh, geez, we lost to Florida State already. We lost to Duke already, but they got off to that start.
Great start.
Syracuse, and they got everyone pumped up, and they were ready to play the rest of the game. Where, I think in this game, this is where I worry for Clemson now. I know they got the win last week, but this is not a 3-touchdown favorite kind of team right now for me, especially in ACC play. Have I seen enough out of Wake? I don't know. Wake got blown out by Georgia Tech 30-16. And now when I see Wake scoring just 16 points with their offense led by Mitch Griffiths against that Georgia Tech defense, which has just turned to an absolute sieve here. Much of the season. This is a Georgia Tech team that had given up 39 to Louisville, 48 to Ole Miss, 38 in a shocking defeat at home against Bowling Green last week. And yet Wake Forest couldn't crack 20 points against that defense in their last game. That does concern me, but I ain't laying 21 with Clemson. I ain't. So by default, it's Wake Forest plus the points. Not sure I'll get there, though. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, I was going through because I wanted to look at this. Just the last few, that was when obviously Hartman was there. Can't Wake Forest, their defense just isn't good. They've lost 10 straight to Clemson. Like, Clemson's owned them. This, last week, while other people liked it too, Syracuse had played Clemson tough, even when they had teams that weren't as good, and Clemson was, 1-2 in the country.
10-0 straight up, but only 6-4 against the spread for Clemson.
I guess the number.
Last 10 meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to go through that real quick because I put a note on here that they beat them up. Yeah, I don't know if I can get here with Wake. This is one I need to look at a little bit more. And I don't even know what the total. Can Wake score here enough? Can they score 2 or 3 touchdowns? I'm not so sure. And I don't know what to make of Clemson. A good win. I thought the game, too, with all those turnovers and everything else, would have been a lot closer if that didn't happen. Yeah, I'm off.
All right, next up, the team we just talked about here in the Georgia Tech. My God, 21-point home favorites to Bowling Green, losing 38-27 last week. Absolutely, and you always get one of these every year where a Power 5 team, especially at home, gets upset by a MAC team. Or remember Minnesota, and I think Bowling Green did this to Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken, like a year or two ago as well. Bowling Green's become a little, upset monster, if you will, the last couple of years. But yeah, Miami 21-point home favorites, 58.5 the total, and that's where I start with this game is the total. Miami, if Georgia Tech's defense is anything like I've seen against Louisville and Ole Miss, and again last week against Bowling Green, how the hell does Miami not put 40 on this team with their offense right now and what we've seen from the Hurricanes this year? This has been a dynamic, explosive offense. Tyler Van Dyke, say what you would forget last year. He's clearly got the confidence back. Henry Parrish running the ball. Colby Young, Restrepo, Jacoby George, receiver, lots of weapons. Great offensive line. The offensive line is a lot better this year. I've noticed that. Why is Van Dyke a lot better? Well, he's not under pressure every drop back. That makes a big difference as well. So Facing this Civ defense, I mean, they should be able to score a bunch of points. I mean, 38, 48, 48, 41 for this Miami team in the last 4 games. So to me, I think if you look at it, you either play a Hurricanes team total over or the full game over, or both. Or both. I can see both of them cashing. And look, I actually like the Georgia Tech offense. I think Haynes King's been pretty good at quarterback for them. The offense hasn't been the problem. Louisville, they scored 34 but didn't win. Scored 23 against Ole Miss. That's a solid performance. They probably could have scored more points in that game if they didn't have turnovers. 30 against Wake in their last victory. And then against Bowling Green, they had 27. They did leave some points on the board, but they moved the football in that game. They just can't stop anyone on defense right now. That's the problem. So my first look here is Miami team total over and the full game over. I might even bet both because I think with the full game over, Miami could get into the 40s, but you could still get at least 20, 21 from Georgia Tech. And there is the game going over the total. I just want to double check something here because I kind of thought they demoted their defensive. Yes, they did. Kevin Scherer here, the defensive coordinator Andrew Thacker, the defensive coordinator, demoted after that Bowling Green loss by Brent Key, the head coach. So Kevin Scherer is taking over as the defensive coordinator. Now, they're betting this game under. Maybe there's going to be weather in Miami on Saturday, or maybe they think this defensive coordinator change is going to all of a sudden give this Georgia Tech defense a boost. But I got to see it before I believe it. And they're playing a Miami team that is absolutely lethal on offense right now. Conor, what do you think here, Georgia Tech, Miami?
Yeah, I don't think their defense changes much. We'll see. This is you mentioned it, over, especially at this number. It gets there. You talked about Miami's team total. One thing is that's why Georgia Tech, when they have a team like that, even against a small school, they can't be laying points like that, just a massive number at all. This is where you want them, catching them maybe over 3 touchdowns because the back door could be open. And I think that could be in this game. That is just a little bit too much. Miami's looked really good so far, but I think Georgia Tech at least can move the football here. So over, and maybe the points. There could be a stay open here with Georgia Tech.
Yeah, Conor Mack, my colleague here, is equal opportunity totals better. Unlike me, I'm 98% overs. He will bet overs and unders. So when Conor busts out the old over, he likes.
I haven't busted out in a while.
He likes.
Last week it was they worked about 1 or 2 a week. The LSU Ole Miss. Oh,
I think you said that about that game last week on the show. Yeah, over, and that what do we have, like 100 points in that game? Close to it.
Crazy.
Yeah. Way to go, Brian Kelly. Another fucking terrible bad showing in a big game for him at LSU, especially from that defense. Holy crap, that was bad. All right, Virginia Tech and Florida State. Next up, we've got Florida State 24.5 point home favorites, 53 being the total in this game. I think Florida State's one of those teams when I see them in these kind of point spread ranges against a team they have the capability of just crushing and dominating. I don't know if I'm going to bet on them, and I don't know if I'm going to bet against them because we did also see the Boston College game does stand out that, they kind of sleepwalking through that game, and they barely won it. There's always that worry that could happen here because you would think Virginia Tech, you should have focus, but it's not the same Virginia Tech team that inspires that, incredible effort or focus or, we really, really got to zone in on Virginia Tech now because Virginia Tech's been down for the last few years. But Florida State does have the capability of running this team over. And I know Virginia Tech, I actually took them against Pitt because I'm anti-Pitt, and Virginia Tech won 38-21. But let's also not forget what happened to Virginia Tech before that game. Losing to Purdue at home, bad loss. Blown out at Rutgers, not a good performance. Losing to Marshall as well, 24-17. Not what you want to see here from Virginia Tech. And I think Florida State at home, and I worry about that pass rush going up against, if it is Grant Wells, and look, he's questionable right now, ankle injury. He didn't play against Pitt and hasn't played really since the Purdue game. So they've had to go with Kyron.
Keep him off. Yeah.
I'd say keep him off.
Yeah,
keep him off. He actually played well, Kyron Drones, I thought, against Pittsburgh last week. That's part of the reason I like Virginia Tech. To me, this is, again, people going nuts about a quarterback injury. He's not a great quarterback, Grant Wells. When has he ever been a good quarterback? We're the poster childs, the Conor and I, for screaming from the top of our lungs that the guy's not really that good. Grant Wells. So it was just funny to see them betting Pitt because drones was playing last week. And sure enough, I got a good number with Vatek, and I said they're better with drones. So we'll see. Actually, I'm more interested in laying the points with Florida State if Wells comes back, honestly, in this game against Florida State. But as of now, probably not a game I'm going to be betting. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to get involved. Florida State, probably well rested off the bye. Maybe look at their team total. I still think they can get theirs in the end in this game. I can't make much out of this Virginia Tech defense, especially playing a team like Florida State. Florida State's done plenty. I think, if you take their team total and don't lay it, and their games have gone over at home. They just cruised over whoever they're playing. Seems like they gets into the 60s. And even these games against Virginia Tech the last few years have gone over.
I am a little concerned about the secondary for Florida State because that's the one area where I've seen them gashed a little bit. Boston College hit them in the passing game a little bit. Klubnik did for a period.
Yeah, Ken Drones, if he's in, score some points.
Yeah. I mean, but up front, they're stout. I mean, with Jared Verse and that defensive line and all the pass rush, they're pretty good against the run. The secondary is their one area of weakness, if there is one on that Florida State defense. Can drones exploit? It's the question. All right, speaking of a defense that can be exploited, and it has been exploited repeatedly, LSU, as they take on the Missouri Tigers. LSU, 6.5-point road favorite, 63-12. I actually think that game's actually still going on, LSU and Ole Miss. I still think Jackson Dart and Ole Miss are scoring some touchdowns as we speak against that LSU defense. I mean, just a horrible look for Brian Kelly. He was brought here to bring LSU back to championship status, and all they do is lose the big game. Time after time after time, just like he did at Notre Dame, quite honestly. I'm not laying points on the road with this defense. Hell no. That ain't happening. Off a loss like that last week, a stinging loss, there's, again, kind of like a dream crusher loss, is that's now their second loss of the season. Now, it's only their first SEC loss because the only other loss was the Florida State game, the opener, but not with this defense. I mean, absolutely embarrassing what we saw from LSU. 55 points. Mississippi piles up over 700 total yards, 706. 706 isn't an area code, folks. Not in this case. It's the number of yards Ole Miss had against LSU's defense last week. 706 total yards of offense. Doesn't get more embarrassing than that. And, you can say the defense is humbled. They're going to bring it this week. They're just not a good defense because look what Florida State did to them as well. Look what Arkansas did to them. Arkansas Razorbacks, 31 points, and they were lucky to win that game. They've been brutal as favorites here in these bigger games, other than Mississippi State, who to me aren't that good. And the other games as favorites, Florida State, Arkansas, Ole Miss, 0-3 against the spread in all three of those games. So this is as Conor Mack would say, for me in this game, it's over, or nothing. And Missouri's capable of lighting up this team. There's no question about that. I got to give a lot of credit to Brady Cook, man. I didn't like what I saw early in the season, but, man, he's turning it around. He is throwing dimes all of a sudden, throwing the ball all over the field. Louisiana State, LSU on defense, you look at the numbers, they're giving up 260 through the air. That is not what you want to see. Even worse against the run. Missouri does throw it more than run it, but if you can't stop the pass, and LSU's not – they're actually better against the run. Or better against the pass, I should say, LSU, but it's not by much. It's not like they're a great pass defense. They're a mediocre to below average pass defense, and then they're a horrible run defense so far this season. So I still think Missouri and Brady Cook move the ball. I do think Missouri will struggle a little bit with the one thing about LSU is they've still got a great offense. Jaden Daniels has been great. Yeah. There's no question about that. They'll score their points. He's been great. He can't be blamed for any of this shit. Logan Diggs running the ball has been good. They've got great receivers like Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, Mason Taylor. They'll be able to move the ball on Missouri as well. So over the total is the clear choice for me. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, I mean, and it's going to go up. So just take it now. You mentioned that they gave up 389, passing 317 on the ground, to Ole Miss. And when you look, their defensive ranks,
it was
everything.
Balanced ineptitude from their defense. Balanced ineptitude, yeah.
Yeah, their defensive ranks are just all, they're 115, 121, 112, 110. They're just awful. Missouri's got pretty good offensive stats. And on the flip side, LSU's offense is top 10 in almost every category. They're going to score points. But that's one thing with LSU. They could win this football game. This is a big game for Missouri at home. I think they're in it. I think you take the points, even some money line with them. Brady Cook doesn't have a horrible – he's looked good so far, and I think he can pick apart the secondary. So I think Missouri's in it.
Yeah, you know what? I'm still clouded by that Middle Tennessee performance where they really struggled, and Brady Cook – I need to get that out of my mind because since then in the last 2 home games, Brady Cook looked awesome. They won and covered as a home dog against Kansas State, and then they played well against Memphis on offense after that, and obviously they moved the ball against Vandy last week. So, yeah, maybe I'm if it hits 7, I'm definitely jumping on Missouri for something. I like the over more, but
of course, team totals. That's LSU. It's just, until that stops and it changes, just keep rolling with it.
Yeah. I mean, show me some defense and I'll stop betting overs. Simple as that. Until then, it ain't going to happen. All right, Cotton Bowl, the annual Red River rivalry, Oklahoma and Texas. And, man, it's great to see both of these teams really good at the same time. Texas, 6-point home favorites, 60 the total in this game. Great matchup. This is a really intriguing game. I don't really have a strong take on it early in the week. I wish I did because everyone wants, hey, what do you think? It's one of the biggest games of the card on Saturday. But I think for Oklahoma in particular, we know Texas is battle tested. Kansas is a pretty good team. We know Alabama is always predominantly one of the best teams in the country. We know they're battle tested. I don't know if Oklahoma is as battle tested. And Oklahoma's look great. I don't want to take anything away from Brent Venable's team. And their defense, which has been good, or Dylan Gabriel and the offense, but to me, Iowa State, Cincinnati transitioning to Big 12 football and way down from the past couple of years, not way down, but down a little bit from the past few years, Tulsa, SMU, which is a pretty good opponent. I will say that. And Arkansas State, that's not the greatest schedule that Oklahoma has faced so far. So Texas will be the big step up. Texas has all of a sudden, they finally got the slayed the dragons, the demons, if you will, because Oklahoma had won 6 of 7 meetings against Texas in this rivalry. And then last year, with that horrible nightmare season for Oklahoma, Texas just handed it to them 49-0. Blanked Oklahoma last year when these two teams played. So I'm sure Oklahoma remembers that. And that's a powerful motivator for Oklahoma. They got totally taken to the woodshed by Texas last year. But have they closed the gap that much? Because you're only getting 6 with Oklahoma. Like, they got to be right in this game and or win this game to cash a ticket. And I don't feel I'm comfortable going against Texas, who I think is the proven commodity. They've gone to Alabama. And then, look, Quinn Ewers in the offense is still – something's not right there. They have not clicked week in and week out on offense. And even last week against Kansas, it took a while for that offense to get going. Eventually they did, and they did pile it on with 600 total yards. Jonathan Brooks, like I said, don't worry about Bijan Robinson being gone. They're fine. Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, 2 terrific receivers. They got tons of weapons there. I don't know. Oklahoma, I know, motivated after getting embarrassed by Texas, and I think they're a lot better, Oklahoma, than they were last year. Make no mistake about it. But you're only getting 6. They haven't faced the toughest of schedules yet. Let's see how they do. I'm not comfortable taking Oklahoma. I would lean Texas here. What do you think here, C-Man?
Yeah, both these teams have made money for you for the most part. Like the Cincinnati game, but other people could have cashed. And depending on what number, they're 6-0, this year, Oklahoma. Covering big numbers, where in the last few years I was talking about, they couldn't do that as big favorites. I think Texas is the better team. But I think they remember the beatdown last year, and I think that's kind of an anomaly. This series is, the past 20 years, tight games. Usually there's points in it. I don't know if we get a ton of points in this one, but I think the game's close. I don't know if I make a bet, but if I get over a touchdown, I look Oklahoma here.
All right. Yeah. And look, by the way, before the beatdown 49-0 for Texas last year, the last 3 meetings were a 7-point win for Oklahoma, an 8-point overtime win for Oklahoma, and a 7-point win for Oklahoma. So again, right around.
Look at these and before that.
Yeah.
Even when Texas won 48-45, 29-24, 27. So, yeah, I think it's tight.
Very, very intriguing game. Looking forward to it. And we're going to find out a lot about Oklahoma, both teams, but especially Oklahoma. For Oklahoma, this is easily the toughest game they've had this year. A big step up from some of their previous opponents. Like SMU is probably the best team they've played so far. And Texas is even leaps and bounds ahead of them. Texas is a championship playoff team right now, the way they're playing. So this is a big test here for Brent Venables in Oklahoma. All right, Maryland and Ohio State. We've got Ohio State 19.5 point home favorites, 55.5 being the total here in this one. Talia, Little Tua, as we call him, Tonga Vailoa from Maryland, continues to play well and better and better. I think he started pretty slow this season, but he's really gotten it going in the last 3 games especially. 42 against Virginia. Second half of that game, they exploded. 31 against Michigan State in complete control of that game, and then a 44 spot in a big win against Indiana last week at home. 3-0 against the spread the last 3 games for this Maryland team as well. And don't look now, but last year, albeit the game was at Maryland, it wasn't at Ohio State. And Ohio State, when they've hosted Maryland, they've destroyed this team in 2019, 2021. But last year at Maryland, man, Maryland outgained Ohio State by 1 yard, 402-401. So even though Ohio State won 43-30, that was a competitive effort here. I'm tempted by the points here with Maryland. I really am in this spot. I mean, and even if they're down by 21-24, that offense with Talia rolling right now, they've got a chance to put in a backdoor touchdown potentially here in this game. For Ohio State, this is their first. They are off a bye. That is an advantage. But, the big win against Notre Dame, and, man, Ryan Day going nuts on Lou Holtz and scorched earth after that game with his post-game comments and the emotion in that game, winning it on the final play. I know they had a bye week and extra time to prepare, and that's normally an advantage. I worry they come out early in this game and maybe look a little flat, quite honestly. First game since that just exhilarating game against Notre Dame Saturday night a couple weeks ago. So maybe a split bet, Maryland first half, Maryland full game, because I think Maryland might be able to catch them by surprise early. Again, they only lost by 13 to this Ohio State team last year, and that offense always has backdoor capability. Now, whether Maryland's defense can contain Kyle McCord and all those weapons on offense for Ohio State, that's the other story. So I actually lean over the total as well in this game. What do you think here, Conor?
Yeah, can Ohio State's kind of come back after the crazy one with Notre Dame, their offense get rolling on this Maryland defense. Maryland, though, this is huge. I like it a lot better. The number would be lower if they were home, in this game as a dog. But on the road, I think they could beat up. But, yeah, 5-0, first time since 2001. Ohio State just wins here. I really don't want to lay points with them. I got to see a little bit more. And I got to see more of the offense. I thought it looked good against Western Kentucky. But other than that, it's still a little bit of work in progress. They haven't been blowing teams out.
Yeah, they only have at Purdue on deck here, not Flush. Good to see you in the chat. Unfortunately, they have at Purdue this game. So it's no look ahead. It's not like they have a Penn State or a Michigan, on deck following this game. So you're right. It's very fast. Here's what does concern me, and I haven't bet Maryland yet. I'm just throwing out what I'm thinking about betting yet. Right now, I wouldn't be on Ohio State, put it that way. It would be Maryland or nothing. But here's what does concern me for Maryland. They haven't faced an offense like this yet. On defense, and look at their schedule. That does concern me. Strength of schedule here for Maryland so far: Towson, Charlotte, a bad Virginia team, a falling apart Michigan State team, and Indiana. That's who they've played so far. They haven't played anybody. That does concern me a little bit for the Maryland side of the equation here in this game. And I think Ohio State's defense might be really good because you look at what they've done this year. They've really played well. Even Notre Dame's supposed to have a pretty damn good offense. They only scored 14 against them. Western Kentucky, I like Austin Reed. They only got to 10 against this Ohio State defense. And Jim Knowles, you got to give him credit. You got to give Ryan Day credit for hiring Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State. And the defense has really been good for this Ohio State team this year in particular. So, the more I flesh it out in my mind, the less I'm loving Maryland, I got to admit. But I still wouldn't be on Ohio State in this spot, 19 points. I don't love bye weeks after big wins. Sometimes you're flat. Bye weeks when you got your teeth kicked in the last game, or you won or you didn't play great, or you played a game, you didn't have a big win. You don't always have those flat spots. So this is a fascinating game. It's a good live betting game. See how these teams look early, and then you go from there. All right, next up, we've got TCU and Iowa State. TCU 6.5-point road favorites, 49.5 the total in this one. Iowa State, of course, got that win against Oklahoma State. Then they had to play the really good Oklahoma last week, and predictably they struggled 50-20. The defense got just absolutely torched in that game by the Sooners. It ended up being over 500 yards of offense for Dylan Gabriel and company. Marcus Major on the ground, a big day for multiple receivers, including Jaleel Farouk for Oklahoma. Had a huge day against Iowa State. So that Iowa State defense, you look at it now, they haven't played any great offenses. Northern Iowa, Ohio, again, who's been the disappointing offense this year. Oklahoma State, they gave up 27, and by far the best team in offense they played, they gave up 50 to Oklahoma. So that's not what I want to see when you're playing TCU here. Got I think, a pretty good offense, and they've shown it against SMU, Houston, Colorado with the Chandler Morris. Last week, though, wow, 24-21, that offense really was kind of stuck in mud, didn't really click. Although, to be honest with you, when you look at the box score for this game, there was just some missed points, some field goal issues, some penalty issues. And look, the defense, unfortunately for TCU, couldn't come up with those stops when they needed it against West Virginia and put it all together. And it ends up being a 24-21 loss at home to West Virginia last week. So it's a really tough game. I don't love either side. I think TCU at less than a touchdown, I'd lean that way, but not really rushing to lay 6.5 with the Horned Frogs on the road. Could it get over the total? If I trust in Iowa State's offense more, that ends up being the question. That being said, it's not like TCU's got a shutdown defense. And we have seen 34 and 20 points the last 2 weeks from Rocco Becht and this Iowa State offense. So it's been better than we saw from them early in the season. And if they can get 20 in this game, I think it's probably got a good chance to go over the total, honestly, because I think you can get 28-31 out of TCU. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Maybe, and normally this seems like a crazy high total, but the last 2 weeks, all of a sudden, that Oklahoma State game, that 34-27, I was like, what happened there? And their defense just got trounced, giving up 50 to Oklahoma. But they did put up 20. I think they can score maybe a little bit here. Rocco, he's not very good. This offense isn't good. Man, and they're an ugly dog. I want nothing to do with this. So this will be a cross off for me.
All right, Rutgers and Wisconsin. Wisconsin 14-point home favorites in Madison, and the total here sitting at 47 across the board. Wisconsin hasn't been smooth sailing, even at 3-1 for Luke Fickell, but much better performance last game against Purdue on the road, 38-17 win for them. They'll look, and they have a bye week, by the way, coming into this game as well, Wisconsin. Rutgers does not, but you might as well say they had a bye week because they played Wagner on Saturday, and they ended up rolling over Wagner 52-3 in that game. And I've said it all along about Rutgers. Gavin Wimsatt is improving. Is he at a great quarterback level yet? No. But so far this season, he's improved his efficiency a little bit. And the interception numbers have gone way down. He's managing the offense. It's exactly what he's doing right now for Rutgers. They have 5 touchdowns, just 1 interception on the season, relying on Kyle Monangai to run the football for this Rutgers team. If you look at Wisconsin here on the defensive side of the football, they have been pretty good against the run. And so far, 3.8 yards per carry allowed. If that run game doesn't work for Rutgers, will they be able to move the football through the air with Wimsatt? It's the ultimate question as to whether they're going to stay inside this number here against Wisconsin. You look at it last couple of meetings. It's been all Wisconsin. Last couple of years ago when they last played at Rutgers, it was 52-3 for Wisconsin. So I like Rutgers. I like the way they played. They played with some spirit this year. They played some more competitive football. Michigan, they hung in there, even though they ended up being a push 31-7, they competed relatively admirably on the road at Ann Arbor in the Big House. And they had some pretty impressive wins at home against Northwestern, Temple, and Virginia Tech. You can talk about how good those teams are, but, they probably could have and should have covered against Michigan. So I could see them staying within 2 touchdowns here. Do I love it? No, but I lean Rutgers. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, that's already last night. I was looking at this, can Rutgers, though? Dude, I think I was on Rutgers last year where they got drilled because a few of those big games, they just got their ass whipped. Didn't cover the number. And Wisconsin has owned them. And it was kind of like Wisconsin with Purdue. They just haven't played them well. I don't love that this is at Wisconsin, but I haven't been impressed. A bunch of
mistakes, by the way, in that Wisconsin game. And Purdue moved the ball. They had a lot of yards in that game, but it's like empty calories. They missed field goals, turned it over, 4th downs they failed on, that kind of thing, Purdue.
You're right. And this Wisconsin defense is kind of not of like a normal Wisconsin defense. I mean, I saw Washington State move it all over them, a few other teams late, even like Buffalo, those few games. Teams got some points. So I think, Rutgers could get there. I mean, can this game get over? We know both teams are going to run it. I don't know. I lean that way.
I like the run defense for Rutgers, and I think that can keep them in the game because Tanner Mordecai, things are not clicking. I can tell you this. The passing game is not firing on all cylinders for Wisconsin, even though they brought in this much ballyhooed quarterback, Tanner Mordecai from SMU.
I never thought he was, yeah. So I think he's all right.
Yeah, he got a little overblown how good he played at SMU. I agree with that. But running the football has been the catalyst of their offense with Braylon Allen. And Rutgers' run defense numbers are really good this year. So it's got the potential maybe to keep them within 2 touchdowns. We'll see, but I'm leaning in that direction with the Scarlet Knights. All right, next up, Purdue and Iowa. We got Iowa 2.5-point home favorites, 41.5 the total. I'm going to be brief here, man. This is the offense that can't move the football on anybody against the defense that can't stop anybody. That's basically what we've got here with Iowa against Purdue. I'll leave it to your imagination to figure out who I'm talking about, which is which. But that's where we're at right now. I mean, look, I had to hang on at the end. And look, he got injured, Cade McNamara. And the backup had to come in at quarterback for Iowa. He really wasn't that much better either. And the offense sputtered. And I know Michigan State's a horrible shambles right now. And yet they still covered for me, a 10.5-point dog. And they lost by 10 against. And at no point was Iowa in position to cover. I mean, Iowa was threatening to lose that game straight up for a long time against Michigan State last week. So Deacon Hill took over. It's still a work in progress for what we're going to see from him on offense. But if there's a week Iowa can maybe do some things on offense, maybe it's with Hill and maybe it's against a bad Purdue defense. But on the flip side, I ain't laying points with Iowa. But can I take a really bad defense on the road? And an offense that's okay, but an offense that, say what you will about Iowa's offense, defense is still pretty good. So it's a really tough game. Guess I'd lean Purdue, but not enough points. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, it's not. This is nothing I really want to get involved with. I was at home, and any years past, if they could just score a little bit, I still think the defense is all right. I think Purdue could move it a little bit on them and be in this football game. I'd be on the dog here at Purdue or nothing with Hudson Card and the Boilermakers.
Yeah, and he was better last week, albeit Illinois has been disappointing, but give Purdue credit. I mean, they were just a wire-to-wire winner, in control start to finish against Illinois. Maybe that gets them going a little bit, gives them some confidence here going to Iowa City for this
Finally
game.
Got a home win, and they've been better last year or two on the road, Purdue, seems like.
Yeah, interesting matchup, though, believe it or not. I'm saying that about a Purdue-Iowa game. All right, Fresno State and Wyoming. We've got Fresno State 5.5, 6-point road favorites, 46.5, 47 the total. Yeah, look, first inclination for me is, man, I love this Fresno State team. 5-0, they're playing great. They're starting to win big. The Purdue win on the road to start the year. I know it's not the greatest Purdue team, but you go on the road, an early start game in a Big Ten venue against a Big Ten team on the road. You got to get credit for it. Eastern Washington, Arizona State, Kent State, Nevada. Now it's been, some weaker teams, but they're crushing these teams. Wyoming's not weak, though. Wyoming's not powerless. They've got a win against Texas Tech at home on their resume. They actually hung tough in a tough spot with Texas, 31-10, covered the number. The App State game, I know they were lucky there. App State probably should have beat them here in Laramie, and the blocked field goal return for a touchdown won it for them. And then New Mexico, they struggled. They didn't cover. But again, Wyoming is not allowed more than 2 touchdowns with team. This is where Wyoming is very dangerous. Home underdog role in the Craig Bowl era has been phenomenal for them at ATS. This is always where they're tough. Somehow they muck up the game. Peasley does enough at quarterback. Defense forces some turnovers. Now they're up against a cooking Fresno State offense that has played really well. Mikey Keene, man, whatever I saw from him at UCF where he was up and down, he has been very good for Jeff Tedford here at Fresno State at the quarterback position. But I've seen this too many times with Wyoming at home when they're a dog. They find a way to hang around, and it's not easy for the opposition to come in here. And, home favorites, they've been a little up and down at ATS. And we saw it with New Mexico last week. When they're big home favorites, that's not where you want them. But when they're a home dog, They have just absolutely almost money in the bank. So as much as it's not easy to go against Fresno, I can only lean Wyoming, getting 6.5 right now. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, I have to be on Wyoming. And when you see Wyoming as the favorite, like you mentioned, at home, or 2 touchdowns, it's like, I watch laying it because they're just not that team. But as a dog, they seem like they can just keep this game close. Fresno has played them well in the past. I don't know, the last 6 or 7, at least ATS is 6-1, I think, when I was going through the notes. Man, Fresno has looked good. I don't think they played anybody, though. Purdue's not very good. Solid win to start the year. This seems like a perfect spot for Mikey Keene to maybe make some mistakes in Wyoming's, because I'll have them the points, and I'll have some money line with Wyoming.
And some money line. So going with that, and look, I'll have some money line too, because I have the line, small piece on every underdog. I bet. I always say that I have the money line, but chance for Wyoming,
this one.
More for this one, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, a chance maybe like for Fresno to suffer their first loss. Again, this is a home field you can't screw around with. 4-0 straight up this year already for Wyoming at home. And as far as in the underdog role, 2-0 ATS as a dog this year, but 1-0 in that Texas Tech win as a home dog earlier this year. And again, just Peasley, don't make mistakes. Let the defense take care of the rest. That's going to be the key. All right, Arizona State, USC. As we go to the Pac-12, we've got a slew of Pac-12 games next up. The next 4 are all Pac-12 matchups. Been arguably the best conference in college football this year with the way it's turned out. USC, 21.5-point home favorites, 72.5 the total in this game. You do have to be leery laying points in this spot. USC off that Colorado Fox big noon game last Saturday where they dominated for 3 quarters, and I think they kind of fell asleep in the 4th quarter, because then Colorado is all of a sudden roaring back to make it it was a flattering final score to Colorado. Let's be real. USC dominated that game for 3 quarters. I think they kind of fell asleep late. Credit to Colorado, not quitting, playing hard for 4 quarters. Shedeur Sanders in the offense, Hankerson and company. A big game for Omarion Miller, by the way. Really stepped up for Colorado at receiver with Jimmy Horn, Michael Harrison, Xavier Weaver, and the other ones, in the absence, of course, of Travis Hunter. But USC now, after a big game like that, you got Arizona here. You got to go to Notre Dame after this. You talk about sandwich spots. Colorado spotlight game, Notre Dame in 2 weeks, and this game nestled in between. Not a spot I'm looking to lay 3.5 or 3 touchdowns or more with still a leaky defense as well. And we saw that last week against Colorado. Arizona 4-1 against the number this year. They should have beat Mississippi State. The Stanford game was ugly. It barely survived. That was a bad performance, weak performance from Arizona, especially on offense. But they gave Washington everything they could handle last week. 31-24. I was impressed with Arizona. They battled back. They were down big in that game, and they made it interesting in the 4th quarter. Better performance. And look, this kid at quarterback, Jaden Delora, didn't play. It was Noah Fifita at quarterback for Arizona, and he played well. He played so well that, look, Jaden Delora was the unquestioned starter coming into the year, but it's not like, wow, there's a huge drop-off based on the way Fifita played for Arizona against Washington last week. I thought he played all right. And if he's starting at quarterback again this week because Jaden Delore is not able to return from his injury, I don't mind that because, I still have question marks about this Trojan defense for the duration of a full football game. We saw that. So combine the spot with defensive issues that I'm still leery with. Now, USC could score on the majority of their possessions here. That's very possible. That's how good Caleb Williams and Marshawn Lloyd and all these great receivers are for USC. They could score a bunch of points here, but to cover this number, and they showed it last week against Colorado, you got to get some stops. And Fafita played well against Washington last week, so I'm leaning zone at the very least. I think he could only go over the total, but 72.5 is pretty high, although it wasn't high enough in the USC game against Colorado last week.
Yeah, we were live for it, and I'm just like, man, should have just the over was in it. And I took in a ton, and it's just usually cashed whatever SC's team total first half they've gotten there. The team total, it gets there. I think you just stick with that. And they are at home. This is where they could pull away, but I think the number's too big in this one. I was probably a lone guy that had Arizona last week, but they got it done. And I think they could move the ball because SC's defense still just has problems. And it looks like, they kind of got up by 21, got a little disinterested. Bunch of points in this game. And I think Arizona, maybe hang around.
It's zone or nothing for me. In this spot with that defense, I am not interested in the USC side. I will tell you that. Colorado, Arizona State. We've got Colorado 4.5 point road favorites, 60.5 the total in this one. I'll be on Colorado here. And look, in this spot, I know often disappointing loss, but look, it's not like it was gut-wrenching. They were out of that game. They just made it respectable at the end. But look, they've gone through the gauntlet. And say what you will, they've got problems on the O-line big time because everything they get on offense, Shedeur Sanders has to work for it because he's not getting much protection from that Colorado O-line. It wasn't a unit that had a lot of depth coming into the season. They've been plagued by injuries. But, man, they've just gone through the Pac-12 gauntlet, man. Oregon and USC in back-to-back weeks for this Colorado team. You talk about a step down in class now, facing Arizona State. And look, I know Arizona State hung with USC, but I think that was more USC just – I watched that game. That was not USC interested at all. They were definitely fast asleep. Arizona State capitalized on that, and because of that, Arizona State was able to keep the game closer than maybe you would have thought. But I think this is now the time where, Colorado's dropped to 3-2, the back-to-back losses to two of the best teams in the Pac-12. Now's the chance for Colorado to get well again here against Arizona State. And I know Arizona State covered last week in defeat against Cal, 24-21. But I still have question marks about, Trenton Bourguet, the quarterback, against, better competition. They still have trouble running the football. That's not a big-time home field advantage, in my opinion, for Arizona State for their home games. I don't look at that as a place that Colorado is going to be fearful of. We'll see. Travis Hunter, I don't think he's going to be back. Good question from someone in the chat, but we will keep our eye on it. I don't think he's ready to return just yet. They did say 3 weeks. So, that's got him on target to either return this week or next week, but we don't know which game it'll be. Definitely, though, for me, Colorado, short road favorite. I'm interested now. We're selling high on Arizona State, who covered against USC only because USC just, to me, was going through the motions. Cal, to me, hasn't impressed me, especially on offense this year since that North Texas game. I think for Colorado, this is where they get well. What do you think here, Seaman?
Maybe they do. And they should be able to score, but this is a win they need. They got to get in and get a win. But I don't know if it happens. It's not that I'm crazy here with Arizona State, and they were, even that game against Cal last week, 24-21, they were awful on third down. I was watching it. Fourth down, I think they were 2 of 5, but third down they were 3 of 15. They had a fumble, they had a pick, but Colorado still doesn't have a defense. So until that changes, I couldn't lay points with Colorado on the road. I'd look at this game, could probably be really close, and I'd look at Arizona State.
Yeah, and for me with the total, I'm not saying I'll be on the over, but it would only be the over for me in this game. Over or pass right now when it comes to Colorado. Even though Arizona State's look, it picked up last week, and remember, this offense was a disaster just a few weeks ago, Arizona State. So we'll see if they can keep it going. They look like they found a little something in Bourget, but we'll see if he can keep it going here. Washington State and UCLA. We stay in the Pac-12. UCLA 4-point home favorites, 59 the total in this one. Real intriguing matchup here. Here we go. We got an unranked team versus a ranked team. And, sometimes people want to lay the points with the unranked team here in this situation. I'm not saying I'll buck that thought process and take Washington State, but I respect Washington State enough not to lay 4 with UCLA here because I really think highly of this Washington State team. Cameron Ward's been great. He's right there so far with everything we've seen with some of the best quarterbacks in this conference. And it's a great conference for quarterbacks this year, the Pac-12. Bo Nix and Caleb Williams and obviously Cameron Ward and DJU, even though he's been a little more erratic. It's a really, really good conference as far as quarterback play. Michael Penix Jr., I can't believe it took me so long to mention him. I mean, you go on down the list, it is a really good conference for quarterbacks. And Cameron Ward is throwing his name into the mix here. He's played extremely well. When you look at this UCLA team, Conor, off the loss against Utah, bye week, by the way, for both teams, so there's no advantage there. Dante Moore is their quarterback of the future. He had growing pains, big struggles against Utah's defense, but Washington State defense not nearly as good. I don't know. I still think this is a close game. The Cougars have given me no reason to bet against them right now as an underdog. Everything they have shown me is that this is a really good football team that's taken a chip on their shoulder because nobody's talking about them in this conference compared to, USC, Oregon, Washington, a lot of the other heavyweights. I'm tempted by Washington State plus the points here, even though UCLA is pretty good at home. And Dante Moore is one of those quarterbacks. He's played better at home than on the road so far. I still lean Wazoo here, getting 3.5, 4 points in this game. Certainly would lean over the total as well, 59. Probably should see some points. As much as UCLA's offense struggled last game that was on the road at Utah, home against Washington State, they should be able to get some semblance of offense back on track. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, this line I think is sharp. It's right where it should be. UCLA, big home. These are those games that, it just is a difference in a year. Like where Washington State in the past with some of these years start like this, and this is where they'll lose. This is why this is 3.5, 4. But I do like Cam Ward. I think this is a little bit different. That maybe Oregon, we're going to, down the line, but I think they could go here to the Rose Bowl, and this game could be tight. So just initially, I have to back Washington State. That's where I'm looking at here. I think with Watson's a solid running back. And we've been talking about Cam Ward since last year, how good he is. So he's excellent.
Here's my thinking with where this number is. And you said I think it is reasonably sharp. But if you strip the name Washington State Cougars off this team, but they had the same statistical profile that they've accumulated to this point, the same schedule of teams that they've faced to this point, and you put the name Washington or Oregon or USC or one of those other big name Pac-12 teams attached to this team with the schedule they've played, the personnel they have, the stats they have, the record they have, I don't think UCLA would be laying this much. I think UCLA would be laying less than a field goal at home, or maybe even closer to pick them. I think because it's Washington State and people don't think of them as a big-time football team in this conference, you're actually seeing UCLA still favored by more than a field goal in this game. Where I think, again, if you attach the same schedule, stats, and record to Oregon, USC in this spot at UCLA wouldn't be laying this much. But because it's Washington State, they're laying a little more. That's why I think there is value on Washington State and what I think could very well be a field goal game here.
Yeah, I for sure. And I'd love to see them, outside of Pullman, go here on the road and win. I think they can.
It's a really good game. I'm looking forward to that.
I think it's going to be good.
Oregon State and Cal. Next up, Oregon State 9.5-point road favorites, 52.5 being the total. This is definitely one of those point spread ranges where I worry about Oregon State a little bit here. And credit to them. And by the way, how good does that win against Oregon State look for Washington State? Seeing Oregon State's defense bounce back and dominate Utah last week in that Friday night home game. We said this is the spot to be weary of Utah. and it played out that way as Oregon State wins 21-7 last week at home in Corvallis. And now they take on Cal, who lousy as favorites, reasonably better as underdogs, especially at home. 5-point dogs against Auburn. They covered. They didn't against Washington, but a lot of that was turnovers, and there was a special teams touchdown as well from Washington.
Yeah, they were down 28-0.
Yeah, and they didn't quit.
Right away.
Yeah.
No, they didn't
quit. They didn't roll over, and that's a credit to Justin Wilcox and the coaching staff. And Sam Jackson returned at quarterback against Arizona State from injury. He's still got to improve his accuracy. He's only completing 52.6% of his passes so far this year. He does have 5 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, but just play-to-play accuracy, throwing the ball has to improve a little bit here for him. That being said, I'd be leery. Again, Oregon State, the big home win. Now they're going on the road, laying a sizable number. That DJU Oregon State offense is still the last, the couple of games, the San Diego State game and the Utah game, a little more erratic. They did move the ball pretty well against Washington State. We'll see how they fare here, but and I like Oregon State and I like Jonathan Smith. You all know that. I just don't know if this is the time or the spot where I'm looking to lay 9.5 with them on the road. What do you think here, C-Man?
Yeah, they took care of business at home like we thought. I had the under, came through. One thing is, Cal's going to want to run it, and Oregon State's defense is, especially against the run, is top notch so far this season. And Oregon State's been able to run it too. It looks like it's whoever's in at quarterback, but Sam Jackson was back last week. If they can find a little success running it, here is a home dog. I think they could hang around. One thing is DJ too. It's like that was last week. It was good. He was at home, but if he takes care of the ball, Oregon State could roll here. But I got to look at California, kind of an ugly home dog after the big win at home for Oregon State.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the role for Justin Wilcox since he's been the head coach of the Golden Bears. I mean, they've been very good in the dog role and especially the home underdog role. So if you're an ATS trend guy, you're probably liking California here in this game. All right, next up, we've only got 4
under
games.
Too. I wanted to touch on a little bit. I'd go under. I know that Oregon State, there's been some scoring games between these two teams, but if they both want to run it, I think you can stay under the total.
I could see that. And plus Oregon State Cal rather, you look at it here with Cal, they've been a run heavy offense this year, and Oregon State's run defense numbers are very good. It's been through the air where they've been burned a little bit. Is Sam Jackson at the point where he can take advantage of that secondary? I don't know. When you're barely completing 52% of your passes, that's not what you want to see. It's not the completion rate you want. So he's going to have to be more accurate, Sam Jackson, here in this game for Cal at the quarterback position. All right, let's go to Big 12 play. Texas Tech and Baylor. Pretty much a pick 'em here in this game in Waco. 57.5 the total in this one. Who the hell thought Houston and Texas Tech last week, especially with the quarterback issues for Texas Tech, would develop into that kind of shootout? My goodness. I mean, they just went back and forth early, and then eventually Texas Tech. That's unbelievable for Dana Holgorsen. Predictable. Shouldn't be surprised. I mean, he's got a Texas Tech team that's scuffling, couldn't move the ball worth a damn against West Virginia, the game that Shuck got injured. Baron Morton came in, and sure enough, his defense can't stop him in that game for Houston against Texas Tech. A typical Dana Holgorsen, man. You can't trust that guy when you think he's got an advantage. And that team was that was a disgrace from the Houston Cougar defense against Texas Tech last week. Terrible embarrassment. 49-28 in favor of Texas Tech in that game. You know what? As much as he was awful coming into the game against West Virginia, I do have to give Baron Morton credit. He was a lot better in that game against Houston. And more than anything, they just destroyed Houston's run defense. I mean, Cameron Valdez, Taj Brooks, they did a tap dance on that Houston run defense with some of those lanes that were open. Connor Mack and I could have run through him for 20, 30-yard gains in that game.
They were huge.
The Houston team. Just absolutely pathetic. Baylor, look, I'll give Baylor credit. It's been a tough season, but it took a half for Blake Shapen, who's been missing the last few games due to injury, to really warm up. But when he started warming up, he started to cook against UCF, and he got that rhythm back. They ran the football relatively well with Richard Reese. Huge game for Monterey. Baldwin 150 receiving yards for Baylor in the comeback win against UCF. That's a buy sign to me, Connor, on Baylor, that they rallied back from a game that they were getting crushed in early on against UCF. But at the same time, that was a nice response from Texas Tech, losing their quarterback and destroying Houston. So kind of want to back these teams right now, seeing the pulse that I saw from both of them last week. So it's a tough one for me. As of right now, no bet. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah. I don't love really this either, because I think that was kind of saving maybe Baylor's season. Like that, to get that come from behind win is crazy. And now they can come back home and get a win here would be huge for them. And with Texas Tech, like you mentioned, just ran all over. I think it was 230. And Morton, when he was in last year, like he was pretty good. And all, he didn't do 161, 2 TDs. If he doesn't turn it over, he's not bad as a quarterback for Texas Tech. I always like Tech better at home. So it just, at this number, it's just a coin flip to me.
All right, next up, we've got Arkansas and Ole Miss. Back to the SEC we go for this one. Ole Miss, 11-point home favorite, 62.5, 63 the total in this one. When I think of these two teams right now, I think offense, I think points, I think of suspect defense really on both sides. And, this is probably another game where I'd probably look at the over before I look at a side in this game. Arkansas last week, tough loss against A&M, 34-22. Not a very good game overall for KJ Jefferson. That was very disappointing because, look, the A&M secondary hasn't been great so far this season, and yet he could only go 9 for 17, 132 passing yards in that game. They couldn't run the ball either. Raheem Sanders, great running back for Arkansas, 11 attempts, 34 rushing yards. What is that? Barely 3 yards per carry? Not good. Obviously, they just stuck in mud against an A&M defense that's okay, but they've shown some vulnerability. And then their defense got carved up by not Connor Wegman, who was, of course, out for the season, but Max Johnson, starting at quarterback for A&M, and he was able to move the football pretty effectively against Arkansas defense in that game. We'll see now if Arkansas can respond here in this one, but it's not going to get any easier playing Ole Miss. It was just saw Ole Miss put up, 40-plus points against LSU last week. And a team that at home has had no problem scoring points this year. Jackson Dart and the offense did struggle at Bama, but really you put them at home against a, suspect defense. They've had no problem moving the football. The question is, can Arkansas improve and get back on track on offense in this game? I think they can a little bit more against Ole Miss here. So I'm looking more towards total than side and looking at that over at 63. What do you think here, Conor?
The Arkansas defense is just not good. 200 passing yards, and they got some turnovers, but they couldn't do anything with it. You mentioned it, A&M at 204 on the ground, just bullied them, I thought. And A&M's defense is starting to look a little bit better. So I think the game could have been, even worse. Yeah, and Jefferson, not great, only rushed for 42 yards. They could have a little more success. This is one I don't know if I bet. I think there's points if Arkansas's defense is like that, but Arkansas's got to bring a little more. Maybe you just look Ole Miss his way. And every once in a while, though, maybe in a game against Arkansas, we've seen Ole Miss, bigger games with Alabama. The offense can go just kind of dormy and not be so great, especially after scoring 50, whatever, last week, 49. But I'd lean over.
All right, lean into the over here in this one. I agree. And actually, now that I look at the last two meetings, Connor Mack, head-to-head, Arkansas, Ole Miss, we had a 52-51 game a couple years ago.
I remember that. Yeah.
Last year, 42-27 for Arkansas, 69 points. And both of those games, Ole Miss had 703 and 611 as far as total yards. And Arkansas had 676 and 503 total yards. So, wow.
Points.
Big numbers offensively. Yeah.
Arkansas's defense, they have better defenses. And I remember those couple of those games were crazy shootouts, even when they had their better defense the last couple of years.
Yeah. This one, starting to talk myself even more into the over, looking at everything, including that recent series history. All right, we stay in the SEC. A big one next up: Alabama and Texas A&M. We've got Alabama 2.5 point, only 2.5 point road favorites. at Kyle Field in College Station, 50 the total in this one. I mean, this is a dangerous game for Alabama. It really, really, although I really would have liked Texas A&M more if Wegman had not gotten injured. I still think Wegman's a little bit, I like him more than Max Johnson. And that's not to take anything away from Max Johnson, who came in a tough situation a couple weeks ago against Auburn and was pretty good. Who was very good, I thought, for most of the game last week against Arkansas. And he has the experience. Again, this is a guy that has played at LSU in the past, and he's been around the block, Max Johnson. He's got experience. And that's why they brought him in here at A&M after those couple of years at Texas at LSU. 62% completion, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. I like that. He's protecting the football, Max Johnson right now. And look, years ago, going back to since Manziel was there, you'd always give Alabama the quarterback advantage in this matchup. Max Johnson's a very experienced player, and he's playing well since he's come in for A&M after Wegman's injury. This is not that big gap at the quarterback position that it normally is between these two teams. And look, Jalen Milroe's getting better, but he is not Bryce Young. He is not, some of these recent Alabama quarterbacks we have seen here in years past. So this is a winnable game for A&M. The question is going to be, what do we get defensively from them? Because there is still that horrendous game they played against Miami, but really outside of that, they shut down Auburn. I thought they played a great defensive game against Arkansas last week. They forced KJ Jefferson into mistakes and into turnovers. This is at A&M, which is huge in my opinion.
Yeah,
I'm leaning A&M to beat Alabama here in this game. I really am. Because to me, Alabama on the road, and Jalen Milroe in particular on the road, let's see it against someone other than Mississippi State, who to me have been a bet against team. And I was on Alabama last week. I was right here on this show saying I'm laying the 14 and a half.
Yeah, I was on it. Yeah, I laid it.
State.
Yeah.
It's a good matchup. Mississippi State's got 0 defense. They're going to be able to do what they want, and they won 40-17. But this A&M defense has been very good outside of the Miami game, and I don't think Alabama's offense is at Miami's level this year. Maybe in years past it is, but I don't think it's at that level this year. I think there's a winnable game for A&M. Haven't pulled the trigger yet. And look, good on the people who it was briefly 3.5 yesterday. Alabama's road favorites quickly went down to 3 and then went through the 3 down to 2.5. That tells you there's some serious opinion and money on the betting markets on Texas A&M here in this game. And I agree with it. I think they're very live in this game. It's a tough game for Alabama. Not saying Alabama can't win it. And the defense has really gotten on track here these last couple of weeks against Mississippi State and Ole Miss. They played really good defense up since the Texas loss. Great game, phenomenal game. Can't wait, but I am still leaning A&M. I think this is as winnable a game for them as they'll have against Alabama. And look, keep in mind too, the last few years, holy shit, you talk about worse A&M teams and better Alabama teams, and better Alabama teams having to really fight and scratch and claw to beat Texas A&M. 2 years ago, A&M beat them here at Kyle Field, 41-38. And then last year in Tuscaloosa, 24-20. Alabama right down to the wire. A&M's given this team everything they can handle, and they might just get them here this year. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, I think that's what people are seeing. This defense is better, and they've played them really tough. That's why I went from 3.5 down to 2.5. I think if you like Bama now at 2.5, like you're just saying Milroe's going to make the plays. Because I think Alabama's defense will be solid. I think this game is close. Can he make some big plays? I don't know if he can. I really see. Like last week, they didn't have to do anything. It just kind of Rutgers and Mississippi State had a ton of turnovers. They just cruised to them, kicked their ass like they normally do. But it'll be rocking there at A&M. And yeah, was that one game Miami just kind of because the defense does look better since then. But this is Alabama. I think we got a good one here. I don't have a bet right now, but I think it'll be close.
And I have Alabama under 10.5 wins, and that's another reason I may not. That's the reason why I may not bet A&M. Because if I don't bet A&M and they win A&M, I'm still going to cash a ticket in this game, and that's Alabama under 10.5 wins. They'll be 10. The best they can do is 10-2. If they lose this game. And I actually bet them under 10.5 their season win total. I was just not convinced this year's version of Alabama with the question marks at quarterback that they were capable of winning 11 plus games this year. This is going to be
It's a good bet. There's
Yep.
some, I think they were worth it. I even think Georgia, because they basically had to go undefeated, and there's one loss. There's some of these I think, it happens.
Alabama and Georgia aren't what they've been in the last few years. You can beat, if you play clean football, good football, you can beat both of them this year. It's starting to look that way with Georgia as well, which we mentioned earlier. All right, next up, we've got South Florida and UAB. I believe this is AAC, I should say. Yeah, AAC matchup. South Florida, 3.5-point road favorites, 67.5 being the total in this one. That was a fortunate win for me because I got a good number on the UAB Tulane over. I really like that bet. I'm fortunate to pull it out with the late Tulane score to make it 35-23. I still think UAB is an over team. Zeno at quarterback is good enough. The offense is good enough, and they play fast. And their defense, to me, just isn't very good at all, UAB. This is a UAB defense. You can't even recognize UAB on defense this year compared to years past. So I don't know what Trent Dilfer in his first tour of duty is doing with the defense, but hasn't been very good so far this year. South Florida, we just saw them put a 44 spot on the board against Navy, following up a 42-point performance against Rice right before. I like what I'm seeing. And don't forget what they did against Alabama. Now, the weather was not great, and Alabama had that disaster combination at quarterback with Buckner and Simpson, and they were terrible in that game against South Florida. But still, you give South Florida a lot of credit playing mighty Alabama, 34.5-point dogs, and you only lose by 14. I'm definitely seeing some signs of life from this South Florida program. Very, very impressive. Slowly getting better play at quarterback from Byram Brown. I thought he had a terrific game against Navy. Kawan Powell running the football nicely. Sean Atkins, a very good receiver. They should be able to do their share of damage here on offense against this UAB team. And I like this hire, again, this Alex Golesh. And he's got them playing fast because, remember, he was previously the OC at Tennessee under Josh Heupel. So he's got that warp speed offense bringing it to him here at South Florida. I like the over for sure. And I think the price is short enough that I might look at South Florida here, 3.5. I mean, this is another one where if you got it early, great number. But I get why they're betting South Florida, 2.5 to 3.5. I think the better of these two teams, and I think they win in a high-scoring game. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, I've been impressed with what they've done. Now, do you want to lay the 3.5 that we're right at? So that's tough because, and UAB looked good in the first half, and Tulane just turned it on in the second. That was a good bet that we had at halftime. I think a few people had it. Tulane just came back and did what they wanted. I think this gets over. I remember the Rice game. I had the over, and it was 7-0, and that didn't matter. The points just flowed 2 weeks ago in that 42-29 game. Both teams want to go up and down. UAB's just no defense anymore, like you talked about. And Zeno, can throw it around. He's averaging 300 yards. That's not good, though, for Dilfer. This is what he's doing so far. I mean, and he was going nuts on the sideline if you saw that.
I mean, calm down, man. That's your fellow coaching staff member there. You hired him. You should be yelling at yourself then. If you got a problem with some of the penalties his unit is committing or some of the play calls or whatever the fuck it is, you hired the guy, and he hires his buddies because the OC is – because he worked at ESPN all those years. The offensive coordinator for UAB is the son of Chris Mortensen, who, of course, was the ESPN NFL insider for years. Unfortunately, stricken with health issues the last several, but recently retired. He hired his son, Alex Mortensen, to be the offensive coordinator because he knows his daddy from ESPN when he worked on television, Trent Dilfer, all those years. That's the thing that I don't like. It's like, are you hiring the best qualified people for the job? Or are you hiring all your friends and all your buddies?
I remember the hire. I just thought it was like what? Yeah. Like it didn't make any sense. South Florida, their favorite. And here laying more of the field goal. That's the tough thing.
Or in this case with Alex Mortensen, hiring your buddies and their sons to be on the coaching staff. Yeah, and so like I said, I didn't like the hire. I had UAB arrow pointing down coming into this season on them, and certainly playing out that way so far with the Blazers. All right, final game for this edition of Hitting the Books. Next up, Michigan and Minnesota. We've got Michigan 20.5-point road favorites, 47 the total in this game. I'm really starting to notice something here when it comes to Michigan, and I'm going to see what the numbers were last year, but there was a period of time where when they were road favorites, I'd shy away and be worried about laying big numbers with them on the road. But, you go back to last year at Iowa, road favorites, won and covered. I think the one time they didn't was against Indiana, and even then it was barely a non-cover. At Rutgers, a win and cover last year. At Ohio State, of course, they were dogs. They won outright. They won and covered in the Big Ten championship game in a neutral environment as big favorites away from home. And then, of course, this year is road chalk, their first time in that point spread role at Nebraska. Last week, they win 45-7. So lately, Michigan, can you lay the big points with them on the road? And lately, they've proven, yes, they've been pretty good, actually, as bigger road favorites. I'm tempted to lay it with Michigan. I don't see the Greek stallion here, who is a limping stallion. They need to put this stallion back in the barn, I think. Kaliakmanis, because to me, I have not seen enough at him consistency-wise as far as quarterback play goes. Against a defense of this caliber, I get it. It's a night game. It's in Minnesota. It gives them at least a somewhat of a better chance, but I just don't know if this offense is going to operate smoothly here against Michigan's defense. Now, they have perked up the last 2 weeks on offense against Northwestern and the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. But, you're going to compare those two teams on defense to Michigan. It's night and day. Overall, he's still not throwing for a ton. The run game is spotty this year for Minnesota compared to you. They don't have that dominant run game that they've had in years past. He's still only completing 58.7% of his passes this year, Kaliakmanis, 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And that's against a schedule that includes, Louisiana, Northwestern, Eastern Michigan, Nebraska. Who's the best defense they've played? North Carolina. Okay, they're getting better on defense, North Carolina, and even they're still not that great. And they only scored 13 points in that game against North Carolina. So, yeah, I don't want this home underdog. It doesn't mean I'm taking Michigan for sure, but I'm certainly leaning in that direction, especially at less than 3 touchdowns. And Michigan, I don't think, has a look ahead next week. If you look at their schedule, they're at Iowa. Oh, they actually have a bye week after this, Michigan. So there's a bye week after this game, and then they're at Iowa. So there's no look ahead whatsoever. I think this could get away from Minnesota, personally, with that patchwork offense.
Are they,
Conor?
Are they at Iowa? I thought they were at Indiana. Am I wrong?
Let me just double check that for Michigan. Let me see. Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry. Next week, Indiana. That was Minnesota. Their schedule.
Okay. Oh, Minnesota. Okay.
Indiana next week, and I still no look ahead because Indiana's a bottom feeder too.
Yeah, Michigan's defense is for real. So
really?
That's what's so good about them traveling. Now they just, they're not scoring 50, and those home games they didn't cover. And Nebraska, the line was too low. They thought them going on the road, it didn't matter. And they've given up 7 to Rutgers, 6 to Bowling Green, and they had some turnovers in that. This is how good the defense is. 7 to UNLV, 3 to East Carolina. Minnesota, team total under. I think even the game, but Michigan could get to 40 in this one. I want to look at a way to take a home dog like this. And, last night I was looking at Minnesota. I can't get there, I don't think. I think I'm just going to have to be off. But I'd look to those team total under and the under.
Yeah, they made life miserable for Nebraska and Heinrich Harburg last week, and I think they could do the same here to Kaliakmanis. I don't think he's ready for face a defense of this caliber right now, based on what I have seen. It has not been pretty. And again, they have not faced anything close to a defense the caliber they're going to face Saturday night here with Michigan. And look, McCarthy finally stepped up. I thought it was one of his better games against Nebraska because he'd been good, but he hadn't been great in the home games they had prior to the Nebraska game, but a lot better. We know Corum and Edwards, how great and terrific that running back tandem is. So, yeah, it's going to be a tall order, in my opinion, here for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, no question. And before we wrap up the show and give final thoughts, great show, by the way. Hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button, 83 live viewers. We appreciate everyone tuning in. I'm going to throw out just a little bonus opinion because it was one of the first bets I made this week in college football, and the line's moving in the direction I thought it would. And I say get on this now because they actually might be the favorite by the start of the game on Saturday, and that's Old Dominion against Southern Miss. I couldn't believe Southern Miss opened a 2.5-point favorite in that game. Southern Miss has completely hit the shits. They've gone in the complete tank and sewer here this season.
Bad.
4, absolutely terrible on defense. They get shredded. They gave up 50 to Texas State last week. Their offense actually isn't that bad, but they faced Texas State and they faced Arkansas State the last 2 weeks. Not really impressive. It's just their defense can't stop anybody. Right now, and it's fallen apart. They're 0-4 ATS. They've only got the one win this year, and that was against an FCS team, Alcorn State. They've lost every game to FBS competition, 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread against FBS competition. And then on the flip side, you look at Old Dominion, and they've shown to me I didn't think much of this team coming into the year, but they're getting better. They hung tough with Virginia Tech. They beat Louisiana, Raging Cajuns as dogs. They almost beat Wake Forest as 13.5-point dogs, lost by 3. They had a great competitive effort with a pretty solid Marshall team last week. Yeah, their defense is still a little leaky. I think the over could get there as well, honestly, in that game.
Shields had 3 picks.
Yep.
But, man, that's what just was because they ran all over Marshall. I mean, he doesn't do that. I think they even could beat Marshall.
Yeah, Jack Shields is the question mark because he's only got 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a 58% completion rate. You want to see that be better, but against this defense, this absolute sieve that Southern Miss is on defense right now, he should be able to have a better game. They should be able to run the football, no problem whatsoever. Southern Miss on run defense, 5.5 yards per carry and almost 200 rushing yards per game allowed for Southern Miss with their run defense. That's not good. And Old Dominion wants to run the football. They should have no problem doing that. I couldn't believe Southern Miss was favored in that game. So that was an early look for me. ODU plus the points. It's down to 1.5 now.
Yeah, 1.5. So I see a couple 2s. Tyler, he got a 3 last night. Yeah, take it money line. I think they can win. And a lot of those games they covered and they've, that's all that matters. They cashed, but this is one they could win outright. That's how bad Southern Miss. Just like last week at home against Texas State, you look for that because Texas State's better this year. But a team like that laying points on the road, where you think if Southern Miss could do anything like in their past, this is a great spot for them. Just got blasted, Urbana. And they were down 28-0, right? In the first quarter.
Yep.
So awful.
Yeah, awful defense. Now, Billy Wiles, their quarterback, Southern Miss, hasn't been that bad. He's got 7 touchdowns, but he also has 5 interceptions. So, that's not the ratio you want to see. I just think wrong team favorite there. I think Old Dominion start showing to me so far the last couple of weeks of the better team, and I think they'll prove that here on Saturday. Great stuff. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Connor, final thoughts before we say goodbye.
Yeah, everyone in the chat, we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hit the like button. And thanks for joining us on our Monday, Hitting the Books. It's Monday morning for all the crazy people out there. We try to give you what we can on a Monday morning for college football. But, yeah, hit the like button. Always great show, Urbana.
Yep.
Nailed it.
Every Monday we're here. Yeah, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. I think we'll both be making an appearance on the Monday Night Football live stream as well tonight for Seahawks Giants, hosted by Jimmy the Bag. So looking forward to that. And again, thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll get the individual game clips posted on the channel later today. Great stuff. Hit the like button on the way out. Another great show. Connor Mack, I'm Ian Cameron. A great Monday. Enjoy the week. Enjoy the college football card this week. Thanks for watching another edition of Hitting the Books. We'll see you again next Monday, same time, for another edition of Hitting the Books. Until then, class dismissed.